I married a woman sight unseen because I was desperate. She arrived looking nothing like I expected, and this whole town laughed in my face. They called her every name you can imagine, said I'd settled, said she'd trap me. But 3 months later, when her father's hired guns rode into Red Hollow Creek demanding I hand over his daughter like she was stolen property, I did something that shocked everyone, including myself. I looked that railroad tycoon straight in the eye and told him she was my wife, and he'd have to kill me to take her. This is the story of how the woman everyone underestimated became the strongest person I ever knew. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The stagecoach was 4 hours late, and Wade Barrett was already regretting everything. He stood outside the Red Hollow Creek depot with his hat pulled low, trying to ignore the stares from townspeople who'd somehow gotten wind of what he was doing. News traveled fast in small frontier towns, especially stupid news, and Wade placing a mail-order bride advertisement definitely qualified as stupid. Still waiting on your mail-order woman, Barrett? Wade didn't turn around. He recognized Jimmy Carlson's voice, the banker's son who'd never worked an honest day, but loved running his mouth. Mind your business, Jimmy. Just surprised is all. Figured a man like you could find a wife the normal way. Unless there's a reason you gotta send away for one. Wade's jaw tightened, but he kept his eyes on the horizon. 3 years since Martha died, and people still treated him like damaged goods. Maybe he was. The ranch was failing, the debts were piling up, and he was tired of eating beans alone every night in a house that felt like a tomb. The advertisement had been a moment of weakness, or desperation, probably both. Rancher seeking practical woman for partnership. Must be willing to work. Romance not expected or required. Respond to W. Barrett, Red Hollow Creek, Colorado territory. He'd gotten exactly one response. From a woman named Rosalie Mercer, who wrote in neat handwriting that she was adequate at bookkeeping, competent in household management, and seeking a fresh start in the West. She didn't mention what she was running from. Wade didn't ask. Everyone who came west was running from something. They'd exchanged exactly 3 letters. All business. No flowery language. No false promises. It seemed like a reasonable arrangement between 2 practical adults. Then the stagecoach finally rolled in. Wade straightened up as the driver climbed down and started unloading luggage. 2 men in suits stepped out first, looking around Red Hollow Creek like they'd arrived in hell. A woman in an expensive dress followed, covering her nose with a handkerchief. Then Rosalie Mercer appeared in the doorway. Wade's first thought was that she looked tired. Her traveling dress was rumpled and dusty, her dark hair coming loose from its pins. She carried herself carefully, like someone expecting the ground to disappoint her. His second thought was that she was bigger than he'd expected. Not that it mattered. He'd asked for practical, not pretty, but he could already hear what people would say. Rosalie's eyes scanned the small crowd and landed on Wade. Something flickered across her face. Recognition, maybe. Or resignation. She climbed down without waiting for help, gripping a single battered suitcase. Wade walked forward. Miss Mercer? Mr. Barrett. Her voice was steadier than he'd expected. Eastern accent, educated. I apologize for the delay. There was trouble with a wheel outside of Denver. No trouble. Wade reached for her suitcase. She hesitated, then let him take it. Welcome to Red Hollow Creek. Quite a welcoming committee. She glanced at the small crowd, trying not to stare. Do they always gather for the stagecoach? Not usually. Rosalie's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. How efficient of them. Behind them, Wade heard someone snicker. He didn't look to see who. My wagon's this way. They walked through town in silence. Wade felt every eye on them, heard every whisper that wasn't quite quiet enough. He wanted to say something, but what? Apologize for the town? Explain that people here were suspicious of outsiders? Warn her that she'd just signed up for a life of hard work and judgment? Instead, he just walked faster. Rosalie kept pace, her chin up, looking straight ahead. If the stairs bothered her, she didn't show it. They reached the wagon. Wade loaded her suitcase and offered his hand to help her up. She took it. Her palm was soft, but her grip was firm, and settled onto the bench without complaint. Wade climbed up beside her and snapped the reins. They were almost out of town when Martha Henderson's voice carried across the street. Well, I never. Poor man must have been truly desperate. Wade's hands tightened on the reins. Rosalie stared straight ahead. I assume Mrs. Henderson is a pillar of this community? Something like that. How fortunate for you all. Wade glanced sideways. Rosalie's expression hadn't changed, but there was steel underneath it. The ranch was a 40-minute ride. They traveled in silence for the first 20, nothing but the sound of hooves and wagon wheels on the dirt road. The sun was starting to sink, painting the mountains gold and purple. It's beautiful out here, Rosalie said finally. Different from Philadelphia? Very. She paused. How did you know I was from Philadelphia? Your last letter, the return address. Ah, yes. I wasn't trying to hide it. Wasn't asking you to. More silence. Wade had never been good at conversation, and 3 years alone hadn't improved his skills. He tried to think of something to say that didn't sound completely stupid. The ranch house is simple, he said finally. 2 bedrooms. I've been sleeping in the smaller one. You can have the main room. It's got a better window. Rosalie turned to look at him. That's very generous, Mr. Barrett, but not necessary. I understood the arrangement when I agreed to come. Arrangement doesn't mean you sleep in a closet. I've slept in worse places than closets, I assure you. Something in her tone made Wade glance over again. Rosalie was looking at the mountains, but her expression had gone distant. You don't have to tell me what you're running from, Wade said, but you're safe here. That's a promise. People make a lot of promises, Mr. Barrett. I keep mine. Rosalie studied him for a long moment. We'll see. The ranch appeared over the next rise. A modest house, a barn that needed repairs, fencing that had seen better days. Wade had let things go after Martha died. Hard to care about property maintenance when you could barely get out of bed. But looking at it through Rosalie's eyes, he felt a sting of shame. It's not much, he said. It's yours. That's more than most people have. Wade pulled the wagon up to the house and climbed down. He grabbed Rosalie's suitcase and waited while she stepped down on her own. She didn't ask for help this time. The front door stuck a little. Wade had to put his shoulder into it. Inside, the house was clean but sparse. Wade had scrubbed everything before leaving that morning, but there was only so much you could do with bare floors and empty walls. Kitchen's through there, he said, pointing. Washroom's out back. Wood stove needs feeding every few hours. Water pumps by the... Mr. Barrett. Wade stopped. Rosalie set down her suitcase. I appreciate the tour, but I'm perfectly capable of figuring out a house. What I need to know is what you actually expect from this arrangement. Wade pulled off his hat, turning it in his hands. I expect you to help run the ranch. Books, supplies, household things I'm no good at. In exchange, you get room, board, and your name on the deed if you stay a year. And the other expectations? Wade's face heated. There aren't any. I told you in the letter. Men say a lot of things in letters, Mr. Barrett. They often mean something different in person. I meant what I wrote. This is business, nothing more. Rosalie's shoulders lowered slightly. Good. Because I need you to understand something right now before this goes any further. I'm not here to be someone's wife in the traditional sense. I'm not here to warm your bed or simper when you walk in the room or pretend to be something I'm not. I'm here because I need to disappear, and you offered a way to do that. If those terms don't work for you, tell me now before I unpack. Wade hadn't expected that kind of directness. Most women he knew talked around things, hinted, suggested. Rosalie just laid it out plain. Those terms work fine, he said. I just need help keeping this place running. Everything else is your business. Then we have an understanding. We do. Rosalie picked up her suitcase. Which room is mine? Wade showed her to the main bedroom, the one he'd shared with Martha. He'd stripped it bare months ago, couldn't stand looking at the quilts and photographs anymore. Now it was just a bed frame and an empty dresser. I'll bring in some linens, Wade said, and there's space in the dresser for your things. This is fine. Thank you. Wade nodded and backed toward the door. I'll be in the barn if you need anything. Supper's usually around 7, nothing fancy. I don't require fancy, Mr. Barrett. He left her alone and headed outside, grateful for the excuse to escape. The evening chores gave him something to focus on besides the strange woman now living in his house. By the time he came back inside, Rosalie had changed into a simpler dress and pinned her hair up properly. She stood at the kitchen table looking through a stack of papers Wade had left there. Are these your financial records? She asked without looking up. Some of them. Why? Because whoever's been managing your books, has been robbing you blind. Wade crossed the room in 3 steps. What? Rosalie pointed to a receipt. This supplier charged you $15 for a barrel of feed that should cost $8. And this one, she pulled out another paper, has you paying twice for the same lumber delivery. Look at the dates. Wade grabbed the receipts. She was right. Same supplier, same materials, 2 weeks apart. He'd paid both invoices without checking. Son of a... Wade bit off the curse. That's Thompson's outfit. Been buying from them for years. And they've been cheating you for years, apparently. Do you have more records? In the office, but they're kind of a mess. Show me. Wade led her to the small room he used as an office, though office was generous. It was mostly a place to pile papers he didn't want to deal with. Receipts, invoices, bills, all mixed together in no particular order. Rosalie stood in the doorway, surveying the chaos. This is going to take a while, she said. You don't have to... Yes, I do. This is exactly the kind of thing you brought me here for, isn't it? She rolled up her sleeves. Do you have a ledger book? Somewhere. Find it and make coffee, strong coffee. Wade found himself taking orders from a woman who'd been in his house less than 2 hours. The strange part was, he didn't mind. He made coffee while Rosalie organized papers into piles according to some system only she understood. When he brought her a cup, she was already writing in the ledger, her handwriting quick and precise. Thank you, she said without looking up. Wade left her to it and started on supper, beans and salt pork, same as always. When it was ready, Rosalie was still working. You should eat, he said from the doorway. In a moment. I'm almost finished with March. It's been 6 months since March, which is why your books are such a disaster. But she stood up and stretched, wincing. How long has Thompson been your primary supplier? 3 years, maybe more. He's been stealing from you the entire time. Different amounts, different methods, but it's systematic. He probably figured you weren't paying attention. Wade's jaw clenched. He figured right. They ate in silence. Wade wasn't much for dinner conversation, and Rosalie seemed lost in thought, probably still calculating numbers in her head. I can send the books to a lawyer in Denver, she said, finally. But confronting Thompson directly might be faster, harder to cheat someone who knows they're being cheated. I'll talk to him tomorrow. We'll talk to him tomorrow. Wade looked up. You don't need to... Mr. Barrett, we have an arrangement. This ranch is my responsibility now, too. Besides, I'm curious to see what excuse he offers. Might get ugly. I can handle ugly. Something flickered in Rosalie's eyes. I've been handling ugly my whole life. Wade wanted to ask what she meant, but her expression had closed off. They finished eating. Wade washed the dishes while Rosalie went back to the books. Around 9, he heard her moving around the house, getting ready for bed. Good night, Mr. Barrett, she called from her room. Good night, Miss Mercer. Wade stayed up another hour, sitting on the porch and smoking his pipe. The night was clear, stars thick overhead, the kind of sky you only got away from cities. He thought about Rosalie in there, calmly destroying his financial records and reorganizing his entire life. Thought about the way she'd walked through town with her chin up despite the stares, the way she'd called him out directly instead of playing games. She wasn't what he'd expected. But then, Wade had stopped expecting much from life 3 years ago. Maybe that was about to change. The next morning, Wade woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. He stumbled into the kitchen to find Rosalie already dressed, hair pinned up, working at the stove like she'd been doing it in this kitchen for years. I found eggs, she said. They were hidden under a very confused hen. That's Henrietta. She's territorial. So I discovered. Rosalie showed him a small peck mark on her hand. We've reached an understanding. Wade poured coffee and sat down. Rosalie slid a plate in front of him, eggs, bacon, and toasted bread. Actual breakfast, not the cold biscuit he usually grabbed on his way out. Thank you. You're welcome. She sat across from him with her own plate. I've been thinking about Thompson. We should bring the ledger. Hard evidence is harder to dispute. You really want to come? I told you last night. I know what you told me. But Thompson's going to say things, ugly things, about you, about us. Rosalie's expression didn't change. Let him. Doesn't bother you? Mr. Barrett, I've spent my entire life listening to people say ugly things about me. Small-minded businessmen don't frighten me. Wade studied her across the table. In the morning light, he could see faint shadows under her eyes, like she hadn't slept well. But her jaw was set, her spine straight. "All right then," he said. "We'll go together." They finished breakfast and loaded the wagon. Rosalie brought the ledger wrapped in oilcloth, treating it like precious cargo. The ride to Thompson's supply depot took an hour. Neither of them talked much. Wade kept rehearsing what he'd say, how he'd keep his temper when Thompson started making excuses. But he didn't need to worry. Rosalie handled everything. They found Thompson in his warehouse, a heavy-set man with thinning hair and a permanent sneer. He looked surprised when Wade walked in with a woman. "Barrett, didn't expect to see you today. Who's this?" "My associate," Wade said. "Miss Mercer." Thompson's eyes traveled over Rosalie in a way that made Wade's fists clench. "Associate. That what we're calling it now?" Rosalie stepped forward and placed the ledger on Thompson's desk with a heavy thump. "Mr. Thompson, I've reviewed Mr. Barrett's accounts for the past 18 months. I found 47 instances of overcharging, 16 duplicate invoices, and at least 24 shipments billed for materials that were never delivered. The total comes to approximately $600. Thompson's sneer faltered. "Now wait just a... I have documentation for every instance." Rosalie opened the ledger. "For example, on March 3rd, you charged $15 for a barrel of oat feed. Market price at that time was $8. On March 17th, you billed for 200 feet of pine lumber. Mr. Barrett's ranch records show he received only 120 feet. Shall I continue?" Thompson's face turned red. "Those are mistakes. Bookkeeping errors. Hey, 47 mistakes? All in your favor?" Rosalie's voice stayed calm and even, which somehow made it worse. "That stretches credibility, Mr. Thompson. Who the hell do you think you are, coming into my business? Someone who can count, apparently, which puts me ahead of you." Wade bit back a smile. Thompson turned to him. "Barrett, you gonna let this woman talk to me like that?" "She's doing the talking because she's better at it than me," Wade said. "But the question's simple. You've been cheating me. Are you going to make it right, or do I take this to the sheriff?" "The sheriff?" Thompson laughed. "On the word of some mail-order woman you just brought in? Everyone in town knows what she is, Barrett. You really think—" $600, Rosalie interrupted. "You can repay it in credit over the next 6 months, or I can take this ledger to every rancher and business owner within 50 miles and show them exactly how you operate. Your choice." Thompson's mouth opened and closed. He looked at Wade, then back at Rosalie, clearly trying to figure out if she was bluffing. She wasn't. "You've got until Friday," Rosalie continued. "After that, I start making copies." She closed the ledger, picked it up, and walked out. Wade followed, leaving Thompson sputtering behind them. They were halfway to the wagon before Wade spoke. "You really have documentation for all of that?" "Every word." "And you'd actually ride around showing people?" "Absolutely," Wade laughed. He couldn't help it. "Thompson's probably having a fit right now." "Good. Perhaps it will motivate him to honesty." Rosalie climbed onto the wagon, though I doubt it. Men like that don't change. They just get better at hiding what they're doing. Wade took the reins. "Where'd you learn to do that, the whole calculated destruction thing?" "My father's business dinners. I spent years watching railroad executives try to cheat each other. You pick up patterns." Her voice went flat. "The difference is they were doing it for sport. Thompson's just greedy." "Your father's a railroad executive?" Rosalie went very still. "You don't have to answer that," Wade added quickly. "Victor Mercer," she said finally. "Perhaps you've heard of him." Wade had. Everyone had. Mercer owned half the rail lines between Chicago and Denver, maybe more. He was rich enough to buy states, powerful enough to crush anyone who crossed him. "That's who you're running from," Wade said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "Hell of a man to run from. He's very good at finding people." Rosalie's hands twisted in her lap. "Which is why I need you to understand something, Mr. Barrett. When he finds me, and he will find me, it's going to get complicated, possibly dangerous. If you want to end this arrangement now, I wouldn't blame you." Wade thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "No." "No? You held up your end. You're already saving this ranch. I'm not backing out because your father's a bastard." He paused. "Though it would have been nice to know I was pissing off a railroad tycoon." Rosalie's laugh was sudden and genuine. "Would it have changed anything?" "Probably not. I'm not smart enough to be intimidated by rich people." "That's refreshing. Most people fall all over themselves when they hear his name." "I'm not most people." "No," Rosalie said quietly. "I'm beginning to see that." They rode back in companionable silence. When they got to the ranch, Rosalie went straight back to the books while Wade handled the afternoon chores. Around 4, he came in to find her writing letters. "What's that?" "Correspondence to other suppliers. If Thompson's been cheating you, his competitors would love to know. And I'm getting quotes for livestock from 3 different ranchers. Competition drives prices down. You've been here one day. And you've been overpaying for everything. It's offensive." Wade shook his head, smiling despite himself. "You like this, don't you? The numbers and the strategy." "I'm good at it. That's different from liking it." But there was satisfaction in her voice. "Though I admit, there's something pleasant about fixing problems that have actual solutions. Most problems don't. Like railroad tycoon fathers." "Exactly like that." Wade pulled up a chair. "You want to tell me what happened before you came here?" Rosalie's pen stopped moving. For a long moment, she didn't answer. "He wanted me to marry Senator Bradford's son," she said finally. "Harrison Bradford. Do you know who that is?" "I don't follow politics much. Rich family? Political connections? Harrison's 43, never married, rumored to prefer the company of men, but willing to take a wife for appearances. My father thought it was perfect. I'd get a respectable husband, Harrison would get respectability, the families would merge their business interests." Her voice went cold. "Everyone wins, except me." "So you ran." "So I ran. Stole enough money from my trust fund to buy a train ticket, sent your advertisement back, and disappeared before anyone noticed." She looked up. "I've been gone 6 weeks. My father's probably mobilized half the Pinkerton agency by now." "What happens when they find you?" "They'll try to take me back, declare me unstable, incompetent, whatever legal fiction lets them control me again." Rosalie met his eyes. "I'm 28 years old, Mr. Barrett. I've never made a single decision about my own life. Where I lived, what I wore, who I talked to, all of it controlled. This ranch is the first thing I've ever chosen for myself." Wade understood that kind of trapped. Different circumstances, but the same feeling. The sense that life was happening to you instead of because of you. "Then we'll figure it out," he said. "You don't know what you're saying. My father doesn't fight fair. He'll come after the ranch, after you, after anyone who helps me. Rosalie." Wade used her first name without thinking. "I don't scare easy, and I sure as hell don't hand over people who don't want to be handed over." Rosalie stared at him. Something shifted in her expression. Surprise, maybe, or something deeper. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you risk that for someone you barely know?" "Because everyone deserves the chance to make their own choices, even if they're stupid choices." He stood up. "Besides, you're saving my ranch. Least I can do is help you stay lost." He left before she could respond, heading back outside where things made sense. Horses needed feeding, fences needed mending, and complicated feelings could be safely ignored. But that night, when he came in for supper, Rosalie had cooked a full meal. Not just beans and bacon, but actual stew with vegetables and bread that was still warm. They ate together at the kitchen table, and for the first time in 3 years, Wade's house didn't feel like a tomb. It felt like a home. 3 weeks passed before Victor Mercer's men arrived, and in that time, Rosalie had transformed Wade's failing operation into something that almost resembled success. She'd renegotiated contracts with 4 different suppliers, cutting costs by nearly 30%. She'd organized the ranch records into a system that actually made sense. She'd even convinced 2 neighboring ranchers to pool resources for a bulk cattle purchase, saving everyone money and earning Wade a reputation as someone worth doing business with. The townspeople still whispered, but the whispers had changed. Now they said things like sharp as a tack and hell of a head for numbers, instead of just laughing. Wade noticed the change most in how Rosalie carried herself. She still flinched when groups of women went quiet as she passed, still held her shoulders a little too rigid when men stared, but she'd stopped apologizing for taking up space, stopped making herself smaller. She was sitting at the kitchen table working through invoices when the knock came. Wade was in the barn. He heard Rosalie's voice first, then a man's voice he didn't recognize. By the time he made it to the house, two men in expensive suits stood on his porch, looking deeply uncomfortable with the frontier dust on their shoes. "Can I help you?" Wade said. The older one turned, 50s, gray temples, the kind of face that was used to getting what it wanted. "Mr. Barrett, my name is Charles Whitmore. I'm an attorney representing the Mercer family." Wade's stomach dropped, but he kept his expression neutral. "That's so. I'm here regarding Miss Rosalie Mercer. I believe she's currently residing on your property." "Who's asking?" Whitmore's smile was thin and practiced. "Her father, Victor Mercer, is very concerned about his daughter's well-being. She left Philadelphia without informing anyone of her destination. Naturally, her family is anxious to ensure she's safe." "She's safe." "I'm sure you believe that, Mr. Barrett. However, Miss Mercer is not well. She requires specialized care that simply isn't available in—" He glanced around with barely concealed disdain. "A place like this." Wade felt his temper rising. "She seems plenty well to me." "Mr. Barrett, I don't expect you to understand the complexities of Miss Mercer's condition. Her father has consulted with the finest physicians in Philadelphia. They all agree that she's experiencing a mental episode brought on by—" He paused delicately. "Personal insecurities. She needs treatment, not encouragement in this unfortunate fantasy." Fantasy. A woman of her background abandoning her family to live on a frontier ranch with a stranger? Surely you can see that's not rational behavior. Behind Whitmore, Rosalie appeared in the doorway. Her face was pale, but composed. "Mr. Whitmore," she said quietly. "I wondered when my father would send someone." Whitmore turned, his expression softening into something meant to look kind. "Rosalie, your father is very worried about you. He only wants to help. By declaring me insane? No one is using that word. But you must admit your behavior has been erratic. Running away, hiding in Colorado, refusing all contact with your family. I'm not hiding. I'm living my life." "In a shack in the middle of nowhere?" Whitmore gestured at the ranch house. "Rosalie, be reasonable. You have a beautiful home in Philadelphia. A family who loves you. A future with a respected man from a good family. A future my father arranged without asking what I wanted. Because you're not thinking clearly. This is exactly what the doctors said would happen. You've convinced yourself that this," he waved vaguely at Wade, "is somehow better than the life you had. But it's not real, Rosalie. It's a delusion." Wade stepped forward. "I think you should leave." Whitmore ignored him. "Your father has authorized me to make arrangements for your return. There's a sanitarium in Denver with excellent facilities. You'll be comfortable there while the doctors—" "No." "Rosalie, please." "I said no." Her voice was steady, but Wade saw her hand shaking. "I'm not going anywhere." Whitmore sighed. "I was hoping we could handle this quietly, but if you insist on being difficult, I'm prepared to file a formal petition with the territorial court. Your father has medical documentation supporting a finding of mental incompetence. A judge will appoint him as your guardian, and you'll be returned to Philadelphia whether you agree or not." "That's not legal," Rosalie said, but her voice wavered. "It's perfectly legal for concerned families to protect mentally unstable relatives from themselves." Whitmore pulled papers from his jacket. "I have 3 sworn affidavits from physicians who examined you last year. They all attest to your fragile mental state." "I was never examined. According to these documents, you were. And they paint a very concerning picture. Depression, emotional instability, an obsessive fixation on your physical appearance that has distorted your judgment." He softened his voice. "Rosalie, no one blames you, but you need help, real help." Wade looked at Rosalie. She was staring at those papers like they were a death sentence. Maybe they were. "How long do I have?" she asked quietly. "I'll file the petition tomorrow. The hearing will probably be scheduled within 2 weeks. After that—" Whitmore shrugged. "These things move quickly when the family has resources." He set the papers on the porch railing and tipped his hat. "I'll be at the Red Hollow Hotel if you change your mind and want to come quietly. It would be easier for everyone." The 2 lawyers left. Wade and Rosalie stood frozen until the sound of their carriage faded completely. Then Rosalie sat down hard on the porch steps. "He's going to win," she said. Wade sat beside her. Not necessarily. You don't understand how this works. My father has money, connections, doctors willing to say whatever he pays them to say. I have nothing. No legal standing, no witnesses, no proof that I'm sane except my own word. She laughed bitterly. And the word of a mentally unstable woman doesn't count for much. There's got to be something we can do.
Like what? Hire a lawyer? With what money? Even if we could afford one, they'd take one look at who they're up against and refuse the case. No one goes against Victor Mercer and wins. Wade thought hard. There had to be an angle, something they were missing. Then it hit him. Marry me. Rosalie's head snapped around. What? Marry me. Right now. Today if we can. Wait, that's insane.
Think about it. If you're married, your father can't claim guardianship. You'd have a husband with legal rights to make decisions. The court can't just hand you over to someone else. That's not how it works. They'll say you manipulated me, that the marriage isn't valid because I wasn't competent to consent.
Let them say it. Let them prove it. Wade grabbed her hands. Rosalie, you said it yourself. Your father fights with lawyers and money and paperwork. Well, I've got something he doesn't have. I've got you actually here, actually willing to marry me of your own free choice. That's got to count for something. You don't know what you're offering. This marriage would be real, legally binding. You couldn't just walk away when my father makes your life hell. I don't want to walk away.
Rosalie stared at him. Why? Why would you do this? Because somewhere in the last 3 weeks, Wade had stopped thinking of her as a business arrangement and started thinking of her as someone he didn't want to lose. Because she made him laugh. Because she'd brought his ranch back from the edge of failure. Because she'd walked into his broken-down house and made it feel like home again. But saying all that felt too big, too complicated. Because it's the right thing to do, he said instead. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was enough of it. Rosalie pulled her hands back. You're talking about giving up your freedom for someone you barely know. Marriage isn't temporary, Wade. Even if we could annul it later, which we probably couldn't, you'd be tied to me, to my father's money and power and all the ugliness that comes with it. Is that really what you want? Wade stood up. We can sit here debating all day, or we can go find the circuit judge and make this legal before your father's lawyers figure out what we're doing. Your choice. Rosalie looked at him for a long moment. Then she stood up too. All right. All right. Let's get married. The circuit judge was in Silver Creek, 2 hours north. They took the wagon and pushed the horses harder than was probably smart. Neither of them talked much during the ride. Wade figured they were both too busy trying to figure out if this was brilliant or stupid. Probably both. They found Judge Morrison in a boarding house, eating lunch and looking annoyed at being interrupted. He was a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and the permanent squint of someone who read too much by lamplight. Marriage license? He said around a mouthful of bread. We need to get married today, Wade said. That a fact? Yes, sir. Morrison looked between them, taking in Wade's dusty ranch clothes and Rosalie's hastily pinned hair. Any particular reason for the rush? Does there need to be one? Usually means someone's pregnant or running from something. He studied Rosalie more carefully. You're not pregnant, so what are you running from, girl? Rosalie lifted her chin. A father who thinks he owns me. Morrison grunted. Fair enough. You both over 18? Yes, sir. Either of you married already? I'm a widower, Wade said. And I've never been married, Rosalie added. Got 2 witnesses? Wade's heart sank. He hadn't thought about witnesses. Morrison saw his expression and sighed. Hold on. He stuck his head into the hallway and yelled, Martha, bring your sister. Got a couple here needs witnesses. 2 women appeared. Martha Morrison was the judge's wife, a round woman with flour on her apron. Her sister was younger, maybe 30, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Witnesses for what? Martha asked. Marriage. These 2 want to get hitched right now. Martha looked at Wade and Rosalie with open curiosity, but didn't ask questions. Well, come on then. Can't keep love waiting. It wasn't love, Wade wanted to say. It was survival. But he kept his mouth shut. Morrison grabbed a Bible and a marriage certificate from his room. They all trooped outside to the boarding house garden, which apparently doubled as Morrison's courthouse when he needed one. Stand here, Morrison directed. Face each other, hands together. Wade took Rosalie's hands. They were cold despite the warm afternoon.
Morrison cleared his throat. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. Can we skip to the legal part? Wade interrupted.
Morrison raised his eyebrows but nodded. Fine. Wade Barrett, do you take Rosalie Mercer as your lawfully wedded wife for better or worse, richer or poorer, in sickness and health, till death parts you? The words felt heavy, real in a way Wade hadn't expected. I do, he said. Morrison turned to Rosalie. Rosalie Mercer, do you take Wade Barrett as your lawfully wedded husband, for better or worse, richer or poorer, in sickness and health, till death parts you?
Rosalie's voice was quiet but clear. I do. Anyone got a ring? Wade pulled off the simple gold band he still wore on his right hand. Martha's ring. He'd moved it after she died, couldn't bear to look at it on his left hand anymore. Rosalie saw it and went very still. Wade, I can't. It's just a ring, he said softly. She's gone. You're here. That's what matters. He slipped it onto Rosalie's finger. It was too loose. By the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado, I pronounce you man and wife. Morrison closed his Bible. Kiss if you want. Doesn't matter legally. They didn't kiss. Morrison produced the marriage certificate and signed it with a flourish. Martha, Sarah, sign as witnesses. The sisters signed. Morrison blotted the ink and handed the certificate to Wade. Congratulations. That'll be $5. Wade paid him. Morrison pocketed the money and headed back inside, already losing interest. Martha Morrison lingered. Honey, she said to Rosalie, I don't know your situation, but I know that look. You're running from something bad. Rosalie nodded. Well, you picked a good man. I've known Wade Barrett 15 years. He's stubborn as hell and not much for talking, but he's decent. He'll stand by you. Thank you, Rosalie said quietly. Martha patted her arm and followed her husband inside. Wade and Rosalie stood in the garden holding a marriage certificate that had just changed both their lives. We should go, Wade said finally. Get back before dark. They climbed into the wagon. Wade snapped the reins and the horses started moving. They were an hour down the road when Rosalie spoke. She was your first wife, Martha. It wasn't a question. Yeah. How did she die? Wade hadn't talked about Martha in 3 years, hadn't wanted to. But Rosalie was wearing her ring now, living in her house, married to her husband. She deserved to know. Fever, he said. Started as a cold, got worse. I rode for the doctor, but by the time we got back, he stopped. She was 26. I'm sorry. Long time ago. 3 years isn't that long. Long enough to stop feeling like my chest is caving in every morning. Long enough to sleep through the night without dreaming about finding her. He cut himself off. Sorry, you don't need to hear this. It's all right. I asked. They rode in silence for a while. My mother died when I was 12, Rosalie said eventually. Cancer. Took almost 2 years. By the end, she didn't recognize anyone. My father dealt with it by throwing himself into business. I dealt with it by eating everything in the house and getting big enough that people stopped seeing me as the poor motherless girl and started seeing me as the fat daughter instead. Wade glanced over. That why your father treats you like you're broken? Partly. Mostly it's because I'm not what he wanted. He wanted a beautiful daughter he could show off, someone who'd marry well and make the family look good. Instead, he got me. She twisted the loose ring on her finger. I stopped eating to try to be what he wanted, starved myself for 2 years, made myself sick. Finally realized I'd rather be big and alive than thin and dead. He's never forgiven me for that choice. Your father's an idiot. Rosalie laughed softly. Most powerful men are. They think the world should rearrange itself to match their expectations. Well, he's about to find out his daughter married a broke rancher. That ought to rearrange something. He's going to come after you with everything he has. Let him come. But Wade's confidence faltered when they got back to the ranch and found Charles Whitmore waiting on the porch with 3 other men. One of them wore a sheriff's badge. Wade pulled the wagon to a stop. Can I help you, gentlemen? Whitmore stood up. Mr. Barrett, I'm afraid I have some unpleasant news. I've spoken with the local sheriff, and he's agreed to take Miss Mercer into protective custody pending the competency hearing. The sheriff looked uncomfortable. Now, Whitmore, I didn't exactly agree. The law is very clear, Sheriff. When a citizen's mental state poses a danger to themselves or others, Temporary custody is not only permitted, but required. Whitmore turned to Rosalie. Please come quietly, Miss Mercer. This doesn't have to be difficult. She's not going anywhere, Wade said. Mr. Barrett, I understand you've developed feelings for Miss Mercer, but she's not Miss Mercer anymore. Wade climbed down from the wagon and pulled the marriage certificate from his pocket. She's Mrs. Barrett. We were married 2 hours ago by Judge Morrison in Silver Creek. Whitmore's face went white, then red. You did what? Married her, legal and binding. Wade handed the certificate to the sheriff. Check if you don't believe me. The sheriff read it carefully, then looked at Whitmore. This looks official.
It's a fraud, Whitmore snapped. Miss Mercer isn't competent to consent to marriage. The whole thing is invalid. That's for a judge to decide, the sheriff said slowly. I'm not a lawyer, but I know I can't just take a married woman into custody because her father says so. That's a whole different legal situation. Sheriff, I'm telling you, I'm telling you that I'm not kidnapping someone's wife without a court order. The sheriff handed the certificate back to Wade. Sorry for the trouble, Barrett. Whitmore, you want to pursue this? Take it through proper channels. He tipped his hat and walked to his horse. The other two men followed, clearly relieved to be leaving. Whitmore stood on the porch, shaking with rage. You think you're very clever, don't you? Not particularly, Wade said. This changes nothing. When Mr. Mercer hears about this, he'll have the marriage annulled within a week, and then he'll destroy you, your ranch, your reputation, everything. He can try. Whitmore stepped closer, lowering his voice. Mr. Barrett, I don't think you understand who you're dealing with. Victor Mercer owns senators. He controls banks, railroads, newspapers. He can make you disappear without anyone asking questions. Is she really worth that? Wade looked at Rosalie sitting in the wagon, her face pale but determined. Yeah, he said, she is. Whitmore stared at him like he was looking at something incomprehensible. Then he shook his head. You're a fool. Been called worse. Whitmore left. Wade watched until the carriage disappeared, then helped Rosalie down from the wagon. That bought us time, he said. Not much, but some. Wade, what he said about my father. I know. Railroad tycoons, senators, banks. I heard him. I can leave. Tonight. You can tell them I ran away again, that the marriage was a mistake.
Stop. Wade, I said stop. He turned to face her. We're married now, for real. That means we figure this out together. But you don't understand what he'll do. Then tell me. Explain it so I understand, but I'm not letting you run. Not anymore. Rosalie's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back angrily. Why are you being so stubborn about this? Because 3 weeks ago, a woman showed up at my ranch and saved it from falling apart. Because she's smart and tough and doesn't take anyone's nonsense. Because when I'm around her, my house feels like home again instead of a place I'm waiting to die. Wade took a breath. And because Martha would have liked her. That last part surprised him. He hadn't known he was going to say it until it was out. But it was true. Rosalie stared at him. Then she closed the distance between them and kissed him. It wasn't romantic or practiced. It was desperate and messy and tasted like tears. But it was real. When they pulled apart, Rosalie was shaking. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. I don't know how to be someone's wife. Good. I don't know how to be someone's husband again. We'll figure it out together. They went inside. Wade made coffee while Rosalie sat at the kitchen table turning Martha's ring around and around on her finger. We should tell people, she said finally, about the marriage, before my father's lawyers spread their version first. Tomorrow, tonight, let's just... Wade stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. Be married? Rosalie offered with a small smile. Yeah, that. They ate a quiet dinner. Wade washed dishes while Rosalie stared at the marriage certificate like she was trying to convince herself it was real. Around 9, they both stood awkwardly in the hallway between bedrooms. You can have the main room, Wade said. Nothing's changed. Everything's changed. We're married. Doesn't mean... Wade rubbed his neck. I don't expect anything. This is still just protection. Rosalie studied him. Is it?
Isn't it? She stepped closer. I don't know. You tell me. Wade's heart hammered. Rosalie. I'm not asking for promises. I'm just asking what this is, because that kiss wasn't about protection. No, Wade admitted. It wasn't. So what was it about? Wade had never been good with words. Actions made more sense, so instead of answering, he kissed her again. This time was different, slower, deliberate. Rosalie's hands came up to his chest, then around his neck, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Your room or mine? Rosalie whispered. Wade took her hand and led her to the main bedroom, the one he'd shared with Martha, the one he'd stripped bare because he couldn't stand the memories. Now it was time to make new ones. They were careful with each other that first night, gentle, like they were both afraid of breaking something fragile. Wade kept waiting for guilt, Martha's ghost standing in the corner judging him, but it didn't come. This was different. Rosalie was different. Afterward, they lay in the dark listening to night sounds outside the window. Wade? Yeah? Thank you. For what? For seeing me. Not the size or the money or the scandal, just me. Wade pulled her closer. Kind of hard not to. You're pretty hard to miss. She laughed quietly. That's usually not a compliment. It is for me. They fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time in 3 years, Wade slept through the night without nightmares. Morning brought reality crashing back. They were eating breakfast when someone pounded on the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Wade opened it to find 5 men on horseback. The one in front was older, 60s maybe, with iron gray hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He didn't need to introduce himself. Victor Mercer, the man said. Where's my daughter? Wade had seen powerful men before. Cattle barons who thought their money made them kings. Politicians who expected everyone to bow and scrape. But Victor Mercer was different. He didn't need to posture or threaten. His power was so absolute he could afford to be calm. That made him more dangerous. She's inside, Wade said, and she's staying there. Mercer's eyes were the same dark brown as Rosalie's, but where hers showed warmth, his showed nothing. Mr. Barrett, I've heard quite a bit about you in the last 12 hours. Widower, failing ranch, desperate enough to marry a woman you've known for 3 weeks. Seems like you got your facts straight. I also heard you're a man who values honesty. So let me be honest with you. Mercer dismounted slowly, like he had all the time in the world. My daughter is unwell. She's been unwell for years. I've consulted with the best doctors in the country, and they all agree she requires professional care. She seems fine to me, because she's very good at hiding it. She's been hiding her entire life. Mercer stepped closer. His voice dropped, became almost kind. Mr. Barrett, I understand you think you're helping her, but Rosalie has a long history of self-destructive behavior, eating disorders, depression. She once tried to... He stopped. She needs help you can't provide on a ranch in the middle of nowhere. Wade's stomach twisted. Was any of that true? Rosalie had mentioned starving herself, but she'd made it sound like a response to her father's pressure, not mental illness. Why don't we ask her what she needs, Wade said, because she doesn't know. That's the nature of her condition. She thinks she's making rational choices, but she's not. She ran away from a good life, a good marriage prospect, security, a marriage she didn't want. Mercer's expression hardened slightly. Harrison Bradford is from one of the finest families in Philadelphia. Any woman would be fortunate to marry him. Then let one of those other women have him. This isn't a joke, Mr. Barrett. Wasn't joking. The door opened behind Wade. Rosalie stepped out, still in her nightdress with a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. Her hair was loose, her feet bare. She looked small and young and terrified, but she didn't run. Hello, Father. Mercer's entire demeanor changed. His voice went soft, concerned. Rosalie, sweetheart, are you all right? I'm fine. You don't look fine. You look exhausted. Have you been eating properly? Yes. Because I know when you're stressed, you sometimes... I said I'm fine. Rosalie's voice shook but held firm. I know why you're here. Whitmore already tried. The answer is no. Rosalie, please. I'm not here to force anything. I just want to talk.
Can we at least do that?
She hesitated, then nodded. Mercer glanced at his men. Wait here. Then to Wade. You too. No, Rosalie said. He stays. He's my husband. Mercer's jaw tightened. So I heard. Quite a surprise getting that telegram. My daughter, married to a man she's known less than a month. You can understand why I'm concerned. I can understand why you're angry I didn't ask permission, but I don't need it. I'm 28 years old, and you're making decisions like a frightened child. Mercer's voice sharpened. Running away in the middle of the night, hiding in Colorado, marrying the first man willing to take you. That's enough, Wade said. Mercer ignored him. Rosalie, I know you think I'm the enemy, but everything I've done has been to protect you. From yourself, from people who would take advantage of you, from a world that isn't kind to women like... He stopped himself. Women like what? Rosalie's voice went cold. Say it, Father. Women like me. Fat women. Unmarriageable women. Embarrassments. I never said that. You didn't have to. You've been telling me my whole life with every disappointed look, every comment about my appearance, every time you paraded thin, pretty girls in front of me like examples of what I should be. That's not fair. Fair? Rosalie laughed bitterly. You want to talk about fair? You arranged a marriage with a man who doesn't even like women. You were going to trade me like property to strengthen business ties. How is that fair? Mercer's face flushed. Harrison Bradford is a liar living a lie, and you were going to make me part of that lie. Well, I won't do it. I married someone who actually wants me, who sees me as a person, not a problem to solve. He sees you as a way to save his failing ranch. Mercer turned to Wade. How much? What? How much will it take for you to walk away? 10,000? 20? Name your price. Wade felt Rosalie tense beside him. He kept his eyes on Mercer. There isn't one. Everyone has a price. Not for this. Mercer studied him like he was trying to solve a puzzle. You actually care about her. I married her, didn't I? People marry for all sorts of reasons. Love is rarely one of them. Mercer pulled a checkbook from his jacket. $50,000. You file for an annulment, tell the court the marriage was a mistake, and you never contact my daughter again. Wade heard Rosalie's sharp intake of breath. $50,000 was more money than he'd see in 3 lifetimes. It would save the ranch, pay off every debt, set him up for life. No, he said. 100,000. No. Mercer's pen hovered over the check. Why not? Because she's my wife, and I don't sell people. For the first time, something like respect flickered in Mercer's eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by cold calculation. Then I'll see you in court, Mr. Barrett, and I promise you, this will not go the way you think. He turned to Rosalie. Last chance, sweetheart. Come home voluntarily. We'll say this was all a misunderstanding. You were confused, overwhelmed. No one needs to know about the marriage. We can make it disappear. I don't want it to disappear. I want to stay here, with Wade. Mercer's mouth became a thin line. Then you leave me no choice. He walked back to his horse. The other men mounted up, and they rode away without another word. Rosalie sagged against Wade. He could feel her shaking. He's going to destroy us, she whispered. He's going to try. You don't understand. That offer he made, $100,000, that's pocket change to him. He'll spend 10 times that to win, 100 times. He doesn't care about the money. He cares about control. Wade led her back inside and sat her down at the kitchen table. He poured coffee with hands that weren't quite steady. Tell me about the doctors, he said. The ones who say you're sick. Rosalie wrapped her hands around the mug. There weren't any. I saw doctors over the years for regular things, but no one ever said I was mentally ill. Your father said you tried to... Wade couldn't finish the sentence. Kill myself? Rosalie's laugh was hollow. No. When I was 16, I stopped eating, got sick, fainted a few times. The doctor said I had an eating disorder, that I needed to eat properly. My father heard disorder and decided I was mentally unstable. He's been using that diagnosis ever since. So the affidavits Whitmore mentioned, probably written by doctors my father paid. Or they're completely fabricated. Who's going to call Victor Mercer a liar? Who's going to risk his anger to defend some woman they've never met? Wade sat down across from her. We need a lawyer. We can't afford a lawyer who could stand up to my father's legal team. Then we'll find one who works cheap. Wade, there's no such thing as a cheap lawyer who can beat expensive ones. That's not how the system works. So what do we do? Just give up? No. Rosalie set down her mug. Her hands had stopped shaking. We fight, but we fight smart. My father's entire case depends on convincing a judge that I'm incompetent, that I can't make rational decisions, that I need to be controlled for my own good. How do we prove you're not? By showing that I've been making perfectly rational decisions. The ranch accounts, the contracts I negotiated, the money I've saved you. That's all documented evidence of competence. She started pacing. And we get character witnesses. People who've seen me work, neighbors, suppliers, anyone who can testify that I'm clear-headed and capable. Most of the neighbors still think you're some kind of mail-order mistake. Then we change their minds. We have, 10 days before the hearing? Maybe 12? That's enough time to make an impression. Wade wasn't so sure, but he'd learned in the last month not to bet against Rosalie when she had that look in her eye. They spent the morning making a plan. Rosalie drew up a list of everyone they needed to talk to. Ranchers who'd benefited from the group cattle purchase. Suppliers who'd gotten her renegotiated contracts. The merchants in town who'd seen her handle business. We need to split up, she said. Cover more ground. You're not going alone, not with your father's men around. Then we bring someone with us. Someone people trust. She thought for a moment. What about Martha Henderson? Wade nearly choked on his coffee. The woman who called you God knows what when you first arrived. Exactly. If we can get her on our side, everyone else will follow. She's the town gossip. Where she leads, others follow. That's insane. No, it's strategy. My father taught me that. Find the power center and win them over. Martha Henderson runs the social hierarchy in Red Hollow Creek. We need her. Wade wanted to argue, but Rosalie was already putting on her boots. They found Martha Henderson at the general store, holding court with 3 other women over fabric samples. She saw Rosalie and Wade approaching, and her mouth pursed like she'd bitten something sour. Mrs. Henderson, Rosalie said, could we speak with you privately? I don't think we have anything to discuss, miss. She caught herself. Mrs. Barrett, I suppose it is now. Please, it's important. Martha exchanged glances with the other women, then sighed. Fine, but make it quick. They stepped outside. Rosalie took a breath and launched in. I know what you think of me, what this whole town thinks. That I'm some desperate woman who trapped a lonely widower. That I'm an embarrassment. That Wade settled because he couldn't do better. Martha's face reddened. I never thought. Yes, you did. On the street the day I arrived. I heard you. Rosalie's voice stayed level. And you weren't wrong to be suspicious. A stranger showing up and marrying Wade after 3 weeks? That does look bad. But I need you to know the truth before my father's lawyers show up and convince everyone I'm crazy. Your father's lawyers? My father is Victor Mercer, the railroad man, and he's trying to have me declared mentally incompetent so he can force me back to Philadelphia. He's going to tell everyone I'm unstable, that the marriage isn't real, that Wade is either a fool or a con man taking advantage of a sick woman. Martha's eyes widened. Victor Mercer is your father? Yes, and he's powerful enough to make people believe whatever he wants them to believe. Unless I have witnesses who can testify that I'm sane and the marriage is legitimate. Why would I help you? Because whether you like me or not, I'm part of this community now. I'm Wade's wife. And if my father wins, it sends a message that women can be controlled and silenced just because some rich man decides they're inconvenient. Rosalie met her eyes. I'm asking you to look past your first impression and see what I've actually done since I got here. Then decide if I seem crazy. Martha was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I heard you saved Wade's ranch from bankruptcy. I reorganized his finances and renegotiated some contracts, that's all. That's all? Martha's eyebrow arched. Half the ranchers around here can't balance a checkbook. You did in 3 weeks what most people couldn't do in 3 years. So I'm good with numbers. That doesn't make me sane. No, but it makes you smart and useful. Martha studied her. What exactly do you need from me? Come to the hearing. Testify that you've observed me conducting business competently, that I seem rational and clear-headed. Even though I don't like you much? Especially because you don't like me. If someone who doesn't like me still says I'm competent, that means more than if a friend says it.
Martha almost smiled. You're smarter than you look. I get that a lot.
All right, I'll do it. But you better actually be sane, because if I testify for you and you turn out to be crazy, I'll look like an idiot. I promise I'm only regular amounts of damaged, nothing that requires institutionalization. Martha actually laughed at that. Fine, when's the hearing? We don't know yet. We're waiting for the court to schedule it. Let me know when you find out.
Martha turned to go, then stopped. For what it's worth, Wade looks happier than he has in years. That counts for something. She went back inside, leaving Wade and Rosalie standing on the street. Did that just work? Wade asked. I think it did. How did you know it would work? I didn't, but I know women like Martha. They respect directness, and they hate being manipulated more than they hate strangers. They spent the next week making the rounds. Some conversations went well, others didn't. But slowly, reluctantly, people started to come around. Jacob Morrison, who'd bought into the group cattle purchase, agreed to testify about Rosalie's business acumen. Sarah Chen at the supply depot vouched for her honesty. Even old Thomas Weatherby, who'd been ranching in Colorado for 40 years and trusted nobody, admitted Rosalie knew what she was doing. But not everyone was convinced. The hearing notice arrived 8 days after Victor Mercer's visit. It was scheduled for Denver in front of Judge Robert Crawford. Wade didn't know much about Crawford except that he was known for being fair, but also for respecting wealth and status. That didn't bode well. They hired a lawyer named Samuel Pierce. He was young, maybe 30, with an office above a saloon and a practice that mostly handled property disputes. When Wade explained the situation, Pierce looked like he wanted to run. You understand you're going up against the best legal team money can buy, Pierce said. I've never handled anything like this. Can you do it anyway? Wade asked. Probably not successfully. But you'll try? Pierce sighed. Yeah, I'll try. But I need you to understand the odds here. Your wife's father has resources I can't match. He'll have expert witnesses, medical testimony, documented evidence. I'll have you, some ranchers, and hope. Hope's better than nothing, Rosalie said. Not in a courtroom. It's not. They spent 3 days preparing. Pierce drilled Wade on what to say, how to say it, what questions to expect. He coached Rosalie on staying calm, not getting defensive, letting the evidence speak for itself. The worst thing you can do is look emotional, Pierce said. If you cry or yell or break down, it confirms everything your father's lawyers will say about you being unstable. What if they say things that are designed to make me emotional? Then you swallow it, breathe through it, show them you're stronger than they think. The night before they left for Denver, Wade found Rosalie sitting outside looking at the stars. Can't sleep? He asked. Can't stop thinking. She glanced at him. This is the last chance. Tomorrow, either I'm free or I'm not. You'll be free. You don't know that. No. But I know you're not going down without a fight, and I know your father's never seen you fight before. Not like this. That's got to count for something. Rosalie leaned against him. They'd grown comfortable with casual touch over the last few weeks, hands brushing as they passed plates at dinner, shoulders touching as they sat together going over accounts. At night, they slept curled together like they'd been doing it for years instead of weeks. Wade? Yeah? If this goes wrong, if the judge rules against me, I need you to promise you won't try to stop them from taking me. Like hell. Promise me. Because if you fight it, they'll arrest you, and I can't... Her voice broke. I can't be the reason you lose everything. Wade turned her to face him. You listen to me. I've already lost everything once. When Martha died, I stopped caring about the ranch, the house, any of it. I was just going through motions waiting to die. Then you showed up and reminded me what it feels like to actually live. So no, I won't promise to let them take you. If this goes wrong, we'll figure something else out. But I won't watch them drag you away. You're insane. Probably. But I'm your kind of insane. Rosalie kissed him, hard and desperate, like she was trying to memorize the feeling. I love you, she whispered against his mouth. Wade froze. They hadn't said those words, hadn't even hinted at them. This was supposed to be a practical arrangement that happened to involve sleeping together, but somewhere along the way, it had become real. "I love you too," he said, and meant it. They made love that night like it might be the last time. Slow and fierce and a little bit sad. Afterward, Wade held her until she fell asleep, then lay awake watching the ceiling and trying not to think about tomorrow. The trip to Denver took most of the day. They arrived in the evening and checked into a modest hotel near the courthouse. Pierce met them in the lobby, looking nervous. "Mercer's team is already here," he said. 3 lawyers from Philadelphia, plus 2 local attorneys as co-counsel, and they've brought 5 expert witnesses. "Expert in what?" Wade asked. "Mental health? Women's psychology? All the fancy terms that mean they're going to say your wife is crazy. Can we bring our own experts? With what money? These people charge hundreds of dollars a day. We can barely afford me." Rosalie squeezed Wade's hand. "It's all right. We have something they don't." "What's that?" "The truth." Pierce didn't look reassured, but there was nothing to do except wait. The courtroom was packed the next morning. Wade recognized some of their witnesses: Martha Henderson, Jacob Morrison, Sarah Chen. But there were also strangers. Reporters, probably, drawn by the spectacle of a railroad tycoon trying to reclaim his runaway daughter. Victor Mercer sat at the front with his legal team. He looked calm and confident, like a man who'd never lost anything he cared about winning. Judge Crawford entered. He was older, maybe 60, with white hair and the stern expression of someone who didn't tolerate nonsense. "This is a competency hearing in the matter of Rosalie Mercer Barrett," he began. "Mr. Whitmore, you're representing the petitioner?" Whitmore stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We're here on behalf of Mr. Victor Mercer, seeking a finding of mental incompetence for his daughter and the appointment of a guardian." "Mr. Pierce, you're representing Mrs. Barrett?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Very well. Mr. Whitmore, present your case." What followed was brutal. Whitmore called his expert witnesses one by one. They painted Rosalie as fragile, damaged, mentally unstable. They talked about her eating disorder like it was ongoing instead of something from 12 years ago. They speculated about depression, anxiety, dissociative episodes, all things they couldn't possibly know because they'd never examined her. When Pierce objected, Crawford allowed most of it anyway. "These are expert opinions based on documented history," the judge said. "I'll give them appropriate weight." Then Whitmore called Victor Mercer himself. Mercer took the stand looking dignified and heartbroken. He talked about Rosalie's childhood, her mother's death, her struggles with weight and self-esteem. He made it sound tragic and pitiful. "She's always been sensitive," Mercer said, "prone to dramatic decisions when she's overwhelmed. Running away to Colorado, marrying a stranger, these are cries for help, not rational choices." "And why do you believe she needs a guardian?" Whitmore asked. "Because she can't protect herself. She's vulnerable to manipulation. Anyone who offered her escape from her problems could take advantage of her. I believe that's what happened here." He looked directly at Wade as he said it. Pierce stood for cross-examination. "Mr. Mercer, you mentioned your daughter's eating disorder. When was she diagnosed?" "When she was 16. "And has she shown any signs of that disorder recently?" "I haven't seen her recently. She's been hiding in Colorado." "So you don't actually know her current mental state?" "I know my daughter." You know the daughter you controlled for 28 years. Do you know the woman who negotiated a 5% reduction in feed costs for 3 different ranchers? The woman who caught systematic theft in her husband's accounts? The woman who reorganized a failing business operation into something profitable?" Whitmore jumped up. "Objection. Counsel is testifying." "Sustained," Crawford said. "Stick to questions, Mr. Pierce." Pierce tried again. "Mr. Mercer, when's the last time you asked your daughter what she wanted?" "I've always wanted what's best for her." "That's not what I asked. When did you last ask her what she wanted for her own life?" Mercer's jaw tightened. "She doesn't always know what's best." "So never. You've never asked." Pierce sat down. "No further questions." The morning dragged on. More witnesses, more testimony about Rosalie's supposed instability. By lunch, Wade felt sick. They ate at a small restaurant across from the courthouse. Rosalie barely touched her food. "It's not going well," she said quietly. "It's not over yet." "Wade, it's not over." The afternoon was their turn. Pierce called their witnesses one by one. Martha Henderson testified about Rosalie's competence. Jacob Morrison talked about the cattle deal. Sarah Chen described Rosalie catching accounting errors that had gone unnoticed for months. It helped. But every time one of their witnesses finished, Whitmore's cross-examination made them sound less certain. Martha admitted she'd only known Rosalie for a month. Jacob couldn't say for certain that Rosalie wasn't simply lucky. Sarah had no medical training and couldn't evaluate mental health. Finally, Pierce called Wade. Wade had never been more nervous in his life. He sat in the witness chair and looked at the crowd of strangers all judging him. "Mr. Barrett," Pierce said, "tell the court how you met your wife." Wade explained the advertisement, the letters, Rosalie's arrival. He tried to make it sound rational and practical instead of desperate and crazy. "And when did you decide to marry her?" "When her father's lawyer showed up threatening to have her taken into custody. So it was a protective measure." "At first." "Yeah." "And now?" Wade looked at Rosalie sitting at the defense table. She was pale but composed, her hands folded in her lap. "Now it's real," he said. "She's my wife, and I love her." Whitmore's cross-examination was vicious. "Mr. Barrett, you said you placed an advertisement for a practical woman to help run your ranch. Why did you need help?" "The ranch was struggling. Financially struggling." "Yes." "How much debt were you carrying?" Wade named the amount. The crowd murmured. "And Miss Mercer, excuse me, Mrs. Barrett, arrived with skills in bookkeeping and business management. Skills that could save your ranch." "She did save my ranch. But that's not why I married her." "No? You married a woman from a wealthy family purely out of love after knowing her 3 weeks?" "Yes." "Even though marriage to her gave you access to the Mercer fortune?" "I don't have access to anything, and I don't want it." "You refused Mr. Mercer's offer of $100,000 to annul the marriage. Why?" "Because I'm not for sale, and neither is my wife." Whitmore smiled. "Or because you realize that staying married to her gives you access to far more than $100,000. Her trust fund alone is worth over $1 million. Wade's stomach dropped. He hadn't known that. "I don't want her money." "So you say. But you did want help saving your ranch. You did marry her very quickly, and you did refuse a substantial payment to walk away. The math is simple, Mr. Barrett. The math doesn't account for the fact that I love her." "Love?" Whitmore's voice dripped with scorn. "You love a woman you barely know. How convenient." Pierce objected. Crawford sustained it, but the damage was done. Wade looked at the jury. No, not jury. This was just a judge. And saw doubt on Crawford's face. When Wade stepped down, Rosalie reached for his hand. He held on tight. Finally, Pierce called Rosalie herself. She walked to the stand with her head high. Wade had never been more proud of anyone in his life. "Mrs. Barrett," Pierce said, "why did you leave Philadelphia?" "Because my father was forcing me to marry someone I didn't love." "Harrison Bradford?" "Yes." "And why didn't you want to marry him?" "Because he doesn't love women. She stopped herself. "He's not interested in women romantically. The marriage was purely political." "Did you tell your father this?" "Many times. He said it didn't matter, that I should be grateful anyone was willing to marry me." The courtroom went very quiet. "Why would he say that?" Pierce asked gently. Rosalie's voice stayed steady. "Because I'm fat. Because I don't fit society's standards of beauty. Because he spent my entire life treating my body like a family embarrassment that needs to be hidden or fixed. And coming to Colorado was your way of escaping that?" "Yes. I wanted to find out who I could be if I wasn't constantly trying to meet impossible expectations." "And who did you find?" Rosalie looked at Wade. "Someone who's good at things. Someone who matters. Someone who deserves to be loved exactly as she is." Pierce smiled. "No further questions." Whitmore stood for cross-examination. Wade saw Rosalie brace herself. "Mrs. Barrett, you mentioned an eating disorder earlier. Can you describe that for the court?" "When I was 14, I started restricting food to try to lose weight. I got sick. A doctor told me to eat properly. I did. That was 14 years ago. But the disorder itself indicates mental instability, doesn't it?" "It indicates I was a teenage girl desperate to please her father. That's not the same thing. You're not a medical professional. You can't diagnose yourself. Neither can you." Crawford's gavel came down. "Mrs. Barrett, please just answer the questions." Whitmore continued.
You claim your marriage to Mr. Barrett is based on love, but you knew him less than a month before marrying him. That's not rational courtship. It was rational for our circumstances. Which were what? You needed protection from your father. Mr. Barrett needed money to save his ranch. That's a business transaction, not a marriage. It started as protection. It became real. In 3 weeks. Sometimes that's all it takes. Or sometimes desperate people make desperate choices and convince themselves it's love. Whitmore's voice turned almost kind. Miss Mercer, Mrs. Barrett, I'm not saying you're a bad person. I'm saying you're a troubled young woman who's been running her whole life. From problems, from feelings, from herself. And now you're running from the people who want to help you. I'm not running anymore. I'm choosing. But are you capable of making that choice? Are you mentally competent to decide what's best for your own life? Rosalie's hands shook. She gripped the chair to hide it. Yes. Then why has every major decision you've made been an attempt to escape? Starving yourself to escape your father's disappointment. Running to Colorado to escape an arranged marriage. Marrying a stranger to escape your father's custody. These aren't the choices of someone in control. These are the panic responses of someone who's drowning. Rosalie's voice broke. I'm not drowning, I'm swimming. Are you? Whitmore pulled out a document. I have here a letter you wrote to your father 3 years ago. Would you like me to read it? Pierce stood. Objection. Relevance? It's directly relevant to Mrs. Barrett's mental state, Whitmore said. Crawford nodded. I'll allow it. Whitmore read, Father, I can't do this anymore. I can't pretend to be happy. I can't keep looking in mirrors and hating what I see. I can't keep going to parties where people talk about me like I'm not there. Sometimes I think it would be easier if I just disappeared. The courtroom was dead silent. Rosalie's face had gone white. That sounds like someone contemplating suicide, Whitmore said quietly. I was having a bad day, Rosalie whispered. A bad day? Or a mental health crisis that your father tried to help you through by suggesting professional treatment? He suggested locking me away. He suggested care, which you refused, just like you're refusing now to accept that you need help. Whitmore's voice gentled. No one is saying you're a bad person, Rosalie. We're saying you're sick, and sick people need treatment, not enabling. He sat down. Pierce stood for redirect. Mrs. Barrett, that letter was from 3 years ago. How do you feel now? Rosalie's eyes were wet, but she blinked the tears back. I feel free. For the first time in my life, I feel free. No further questions. Crawford called a recess. They had 15 minutes before closing arguments. In the hallway, Rosalie collapsed against the wall. He's going to win, she said. Did you see the judge's face? He believes them. You don't know that. Wade, they made me sound crazy. They took my worst moment and used it to define me. How do I fight that? By not giving up. Wade cupped her face. You are not the person in that letter anymore. You're not scared or desperate or drowning. You're strong. You saved my ranch. You stood up to your father. You built a life on your own terms. That's who you are. Make sure the judge knows it. Rosalie nodded. She straightened up, smoothed her dress, and walked back into the courtroom like she was walking into battle. Closing arguments were short. Whitmore painted Rosalie as tragic and broken. Pierce painted her as brave and competent. Then it was up to Judge Crawford. He sat in silence for a long time, reading through papers, looking between Rosalie and her father. Finally, he spoke. This is a complicated case. On one hand, we have evidence of past mental health struggles. On the other, we have evidence of current competence. The question before me is whether Mrs. Barrett is capable of making rational decisions about her own life. He paused. I find that she is. Rosalie gasped. Wade grabbed her hand. Crawford continued. While Mrs. Barrett has had difficulties in the past, there's no evidence that she currently lacks mental capacity. Her business decisions have been sound. Her testimony was coherent and rational. And most importantly, she's an adult woman who has clearly expressed her wishes. In the absence of compelling evidence of current mental incapacity, I cannot in good conscience strip her of her autonomy. He looked at Victor Mercer. Mr. Mercer, I understand you're concerned for your daughter, but sometimes the best thing a parent can do is let go. Petition denied. The gavel came down.
Rosalie burst into tears. Wade pulled her into his arms while she sobbed against his chest. They'd won. Victor Mercer stood slowly. He looked at Rosalie for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he turned and walked out without a word. His legal team followed, leaving papers scattered across their table like debris. Outside the courthouse, Rosalie stood in the Denver sunlight and breathed like she'd been underwater for years. "I'm free," she whispered. "You're free," Wade confirmed. She turned to him. "What now?" "Now we go home." They rode back to Red Hollow Creek the next day, and for the first time since arriving in Colorado, Rosalie looked like she believed she might actually get to stay. The ranch looked different when they got back. Or maybe Rosalie was looking at it differently. Either way, when Wade helped her down from the wagon and she stood in the yard looking at the house, the barn, the fences that still needed mending, it felt like home in a way it hadn't before. Before, it had been refuge. Now it was hers. "I'm going to check on the horses," Wade said. "You should rest. It's been a long few days." But Rosalie didn't want to rest. She wanted to work. She wanted to dig her hands into something real and solid and prove to herself that the judge's ruling hadn't been a dream. She found Wade in the barn an hour later, mucking out stalls. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Helping." "You don't need to." "I know I don't need to. I want to." She grabbed a pitchfork. "Besides, we're partners, aren't we? Partners work together." Wade smiled. "Yeah, we are." They worked side by side until sunset, not talking much, just existing in the same space. It was comfortable in a way Rosalie had never experienced before. No pressure to be charming or entertaining, no need to fill silence with chatter, just two people doing work that needed doing. That night, Rosalie cooked dinner while Wade cleaned up. They ate at the kitchen table like they had every night for weeks. Except now there was no underlying tension, no wondering if this was temporary, no waiting for the other shoe to drop. "What do you think he'll do?" Rosalie asked suddenly. "My father." Wade looked up from his plate. "Honestly? I don't know. Men like him don't take losing well. He could still cause trouble, file appeals, find other ways to make our lives difficult." "Let him try. We beat him once. We can do it again." Rosalie wanted to believe that, but she knew her father better than Wade did. Victor Mercer didn't forgive, and he didn't forget. The fact that he'd left the courtroom without a fight worried her more than if he'd made threats. Quiet Victor was dangerous Victor, but she didn't say that to Wade. He looked relaxed for the first time in weeks, and she didn't want to ruin it with speculation about future problems. The next morning, Martha Henderson showed up at the ranch carrying a basket. "Don't get excited," she said when Rosalie answered the door. "This isn't a friendship visit. I just figured you probably didn't have time to bake while you were fighting for your freedom in Denver." The basket contained fresh bread, jam, and what looked like apple pie. "Thank you," Rosalie said, genuinely touched. "Don't thank me yet. Half the town's still convinced you're trouble." Martha shifted her weight. "But the other half thinks you're all right. And word is spreading about what you did for Jacob Morrison and the others with that cattle deal. People are starting to see you as someone who pulls her weight." "I am someone who pulls her weight." "I know that. I'm just saying it took everyone else a while to notice." Martha handed over the basket. "Anyway, welcome home. Try not to cause any more scandals for a while. My nerves can't take it." She left before Rosalie could respond. Wade came up behind her. "Was that Martha Henderson being nice?" "I think it was. I'm not entirely sure." "Should we check the pie for poison?" Rosalie laughed. "Probably, but I'm willing to risk it." The pie wasn't poisoned, it was actually delicious. They ate half of it after dinner and saved the rest for the next day. Life settled into a rhythm. Wade handled the physical labor of the ranch while Rosalie managed the books and contracts. They worked well together, anticipating each other's needs, dividing tasks without discussion. It felt natural in a way Rosalie's entire previous life had never felt. 3 weeks after the Denver hearing, a letter arrived. Rosalie recognized her father's handwriting immediately. Her hand shook as she opened it. The letter was short. "Rosalie, I will not contest the judge's ruling. You have made your choice, and I must respect it, however much I disagree. Your trust fund remains yours. I have instructed my attorneys to transfer control to you. The money should be available within the month. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for in Colorado. I hope it makes you happy. Your father. Rosalie read it 3 times, looking for hidden threats or conditions, but there were none. It was just a father accepting defeat. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt sad. Bad news? Wade asked, seeing her expression. No, actually, I think it's good news. My father's letting me go. She handed him the letter. And apparently I'm about to become very wealthy. Wade read it carefully. How much money are we talking about? My trust fund was set up when I was born. Last I knew, it was worth about $1.2 million. Wade nearly dropped the letter. Jesus Christ. I know. Rosalie, that's more money than most people see in 10 lifetimes. I know. What are you going to do with it? The question hung in the air between them. What was she going to do? She could leave, buy a house in San Francisco or New York, travel, live like the wealthy heiress she was supposed to be. Or she could stay. I'm going to invest it in the ranch, she said. Wade stared at her. What? The ranch. We could expand, buy more land, hire help, build a proper operation instead of just scraping by. Rosalie, I can't let you in. You're not letting me do anything. I'm choosing to invest in our future. The ranch is half mine now, isn't it? We're married. What's mine is yours. That's not how it works. Money you had before marriage stays yours. Then I'm giving it to you, to us, to this. She grabbed his hands. Wade, I spent 28 years living in a world where money was the only thing that mattered, where everything was a transaction. I don't want that anymore. I want to build something real, something that matters, and I want to do it here, with you. Wade pulled her close. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. They spent the next month planning. Rosalie drew up budgets and expansion proposals. Wade consulted with neighboring ranchers about what land might be available. They talked to contractors about building a bigger barn, better fencing, maybe even adding on to the house. We're going to need more help, Wade said one evening. Can't run a bigger operation with just the 2 of us. I've been thinking about that. What if we hired women? Women ranch hands? Why not? There are plenty of widows and unmarried women around here who need work. They're strong, capable, and usually willing to work for less than men. It's good business. Wade considered it. Town might talk. Town already talks. Let them. We'll build the best operation in the territory, and they can complain all they want. They hired 3 women to start. Mary Sullivan, a widow with 2 kids who needed steady income. Jane Porter, a woman in her 40s who'd been working odd jobs and could outwork most men. And Emma Chen, Sarah's younger sister who wanted to learn ranching. The first week was rough. The women had to prove themselves to the neighboring ranchers who thought Wade had lost his mind. But they worked hard, learned fast, and didn't quit when things got difficult. By the second month, even the skeptics had to admit it was working. The ranch grew. They bought another 100 acres from Thomas Weatherby, who was getting too old to work all his land. They built a new barn. They brought in better breeding stock. Slowly, methodically, Wade and Rosalie built something that looked like success. But success came with its own problems. The bigger they got, the more attention they attracted. Other ranchers started copying their methods. Suppliers tried to charge more, and there were men who didn't like seeing a woman have that much power. The trouble started with Jack Morrison, Jacob's cousin. He'd been trying to buy Weatherby's land for years and was furious when Wade got it instead. You only got that land because your wife threw money around, he said one day at the general store. Loud enough for everyone to hear. Wade was there buying supplies. I got that land because Thomas wanted to sell to someone who'd respect it. You got it because you married a rich girl and suddenly you're a big man. Jack stepped closer. Everyone knows you were broke before she showed up. Everyone knows you married her for money. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? Convenient how you placed that ad right when you were about to lose everything. Convenient how you married the first woman dumb enough to respond. Convenient how she happened to be rich. Wade's fist connected with Jack's jaw before he'd consciously decided to throw the punch. Jack went down hard. Wade stood over him, breathing heavily. You can insult me all you want, but you speak about my wife like that again, and I'll do worse than knock you down. Jack wiped blood from his mouth. This isn't over, Barrett. Wade walked out, his hand throbbing. He hadn't hit anyone in years. Probably shouldn't have hit Jack. But hearing someone talk about Rosalie like she was stupid or desperate
or just a meal ticket made something snap. Rosalie was waiting when he got home. She took one look at his bruised knuckles and sighed. What did he say? Doesn't matter. Wade. He insulted you. I hit him. End of story. Rosalie cleaned his hand with gentle fingers. You can't punch everyone who says something mean about me. You'll spend your whole life with bruised knuckles. Worth it? No, it's not. Because men like Jack Morrison want you to lose your temper. They want to make you look violent and unstable. Then they can say I married a brute and maybe I wasn't so competent after all. Wade hadn't thought of it that way. So what do I do? Just let them talk? You let me handle it. She wrapped his hand in a clean bandage. I'm not some fragile thing that needs defending. I can fight my own battles. 2 days later, Jack Morrison's supplier contracts mysteriously fell through. Turned out the companies he'd been buying from had gotten better offers from other ranchers. Ranchers Rosalie had quietly contacted with deals too good to refuse. Within a week, Jack was scrambling to find new suppliers and paying double what he'd been paying before. Did you do that? Wade asked when he heard. Rosalie looked up from her ledgers with an innocent expression. Do what? You know what. I simply made some business connections. If Jack's previous suppliers decided to pursue other opportunities, that's capitalism. Wade laughed. Remind me never to get on your bad side. You're on my good side. You're safe. But not everyone was willing to let Rosalie fight her own battles. The women she'd hired were fiercely loyal. When they heard what Jack Morrison had said, they made sure everyone in town knew exactly what kind of man he was. Within a month, Jack's reputation was shredded. His ranch hands quit. His credit dried up. He ended up selling his operation to a rancher from Wyoming and leaving Colorado entirely. I almost feel bad for him, Wade said. Don't, Rosalie replied. He thought he could bully us because I'm a woman and you're protective of me. He learned otherwise. That's on him. Summer turned to fall. The ranch continued to grow. They hired 2 more workers and bought another 50 acres. The house got an addition, a proper office for Rosalie, and a second bedroom they weren't quite sure what to do with yet. Martha Henderson started inviting Rosalie to the women's social gatherings. At first, Rosalie declined. She had no interest in sitting around discussing recipes and gossip, but Martha was persistent. You're part of this community now, she said. That means showing up, even when you don't want to. So Rosalie went. And it was exactly as boring as she'd expected. Women talking about their husbands and children and the latest catalog from Denver. But then Sarah Chen asked about the ranch expansion, and Emma's mother wanted to know about hiring practices. And suddenly Rosalie was explaining profit margins and employee retention strategies to a room full of frontier women who were running households like small businesses. My husband handles all the ranch money, one woman said. I wouldn't know where to start. Why not? Rosalie asked. You manage household expenses, don't you? Well, yes, but that's different. It's not different. It's the same skills applied to a larger operation. You track expenses, manage resources, make decisions about allocation. That's business. The women looked at each other. Could you teach us? Martha asked. That's how Rosalie started holding weekly sessions on bookkeeping and financial management. She taught the women how to read ledgers, how to spot theft, how to negotiate better prices with suppliers. Some of the husbands complained at first, but when their wives started saving them money and catching mistakes in their accounts, the complaints stopped. Within 6 months, Rosalie had transformed the women of Red Hollow Creek into the most financially literate group of ranch wives in Colorado. You're building an empire, Wade said one evening, watching Rosalie prepare for another session. I'm building a community. That's different. Is it? Yes. An empire is about control. A community is about lifting everyone up together. Wade kissed the top of her head. You're amazing, you know that? I'm practical. There's a difference. But she smiled when she said it. Winter came early that year. By November, snow was piling up and temperatures were dropping below 0 at night. The ranch work slowed, but there was still plenty to do. Feeding animals in the cold, checking fences, making sure nothing froze that shouldn't freeze. Wade noticed Rosalie was tired more often. She'd always been energetic, but lately she seemed to wear out faster. She'd fall asleep on the couch right after dinner. Sometimes she'd get dizzy standing up too quickly. You feeling all right? He asked one morning after she'd barely touched her breakfast. Fine, just tired. You're never just tired. What's wrong? Rosalie set down her coffee cup. She'd been avoiding coffee lately, Wade realized, and certain foods, things she used to love, now made her nauseous. His heart stopped. Rosalie, she met his eyes. I think I'm pregnant. The world tilted. Wade sat down hard. You think or you know?
I'm 3 weeks late. I've been sick in the mornings. I can't stand the smell of bacon anymore. She twisted her hands together. I'm pretty sure. How long have you known? I suspected 2 weeks ago. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you. Wade tried to process this. A baby. They were going to have a baby. He was going to be a father again. The last time he'd been a father, his wife had died. Wade? Rosalie's voice was small. Say something. I'm terrified, he admitted. Of what? Of losing you. Martha died so young. What if I'm not Martha? Rosalie moved to sit beside him. I'm healthy, I'm strong, and we'll get the best doctor in the territory. Whatever it takes. But what if something goes wrong? What if nothing goes wrong? What if everything is fine, and in 7 months we have a baby who's healthy and perfect and ours? She grabbed his hand. We can't live in fear of what might happen. We have to trust that we'll handle whatever comes.
Wade pulled her close. She was right. He knew she was right. But the fear didn't go away. It just settled into his chest like a weight. They told the ranch workers first. Mary and Jane were excited. Emma immediately started knitting baby clothes. The news spread through town quickly after that. Martha Henderson showed up with advice, half of which contradicted itself. You need to eat more, but not too much. And avoid heavy lifting. But don't stop working entirely or the baby will be lazy. Rosalie listened patiently and ignored most of it. As her belly grew, Wade became impossibly protective. He didn't want her riding horses or lifting anything heavy or working too hard. Rosalie tolerated it for about a week before putting her foot down. I'm pregnant, not made of glass, she said. I can still work. But what if? No what ifs. I'm doing this my way, which means I'm working right up until labor starts, and you're going to deal with it. Wade dealt with it by hovering anxiously whenever she did anything more strenuous than sitting down. This is going to be a long 7 months, Rosalie muttered. It was 6 months, actually. The baby came early. Rosalie's water broke on a Tuesday afternoon while she was going over accounts. Wade was in the barn. She had to send Emma running to get him while she breathed through the first contractions. The midwife arrived an hour later. Mrs. Patterson, a woman who'd delivered half the babies in the territory and had seen everything. First baby? She asked. Yes, Rosalie gasped. Could be a while then. Get comfortable. It was 18 hours. 18 hours of pain and fear, and Wade holding Rosalie's hand while she squeezed hard enough to cut off circulation. 18 hours of Mrs. Patterson calmly checking progress and telling them everything was fine, even though Rosalie was convinced she was dying. I can't do this, Rosalie said at hour 15. Yes, you can, Wade said. No, I actually can't. I'm done. I quit. Little late for that. I hate you. I know. At hour 17, Mrs. Patterson said, All right, it's time. Next contraction, you push. Rosalie pushed and screamed and pushed again. And then suddenly there was crying. Not Rosalie's crying, a baby's crying. It's a girl, Mrs. Patterson announced, holding up a tiny, red, screaming thing covered in blood and who knows what else. Wade stared at his daughter in absolute wonder. Rosalie was crying and laughing and shaking. Is she okay? Is she healthy? Mrs. Patterson cleaned the baby and wrapped her in a blanket. She's perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, good lungs. Everything's where it should be. She handed the baby to Rosalie. Wade had forgotten this feeling. The overwhelming, terrifying, beautiful feeling of holding someone so small and fragile and entirely dependent on you. His daughter looked up at him with unfocused eyes and made a little noise. Hi, he whispered. I'm your dad. Rosalie was crying harder now. She's beautiful. She looks like you. She looks like a potato, Wade laughed. A beautiful potato. They named her Clara. Clara Marie Barrett. The first few weeks were brutal. Clara cried constantly. She didn't sleep. Rosalie was exhausted and sore and convinced she was doing everything wrong.
What if I drop her? She asked Wade at 3 in the morning, both of them awake again because Clara was screaming. You won't drop her. But what if I do? Then we'll catch her. That's not reassuring. But slowly they figured it out. Rosalie learned that Clara preferred being held against her shoulder, not cradled in her arms. Wade learned that walking around the house while humming helped her fall asleep. They learned to survive on 4 hours of sleep and coffee. The ranch workers helped. Mary had raised 2 kids and knew every trick. Emma was happy to hold Clara while Rosalie caught a nap. Even Jane, who claimed she didn't like babies, could be found singing to Clara when she thought no one was watching. Spring came. Clara was 3 months old and starting to smile. Rosalie was back to managing the books, though at a slower pace. Wade was teaching Mary and Jane to handle more of the ranch operations. One evening, Wade found Rosalie sitting on the porch with Clara in her arms, both of them watching the sunset. Can I tell you something? Rosalie said as he sat beside her. Anything. I'm happy. Actually, genuinely happy. For the first time in my entire life, I'm not trying to be someone else or fix something about myself or prove I'm good enough. I'm just me. And that's enough. Wade put his arm around her. More than enough. Clara made a gurgling noise and grabbed Rosalie's finger. You think my father knows about her? Rosalie asked. Wade had wondered the same thing. They'd sent a letter announcing Clara's birth, but hadn't received a response. That had been 2 months ago. I don't know. Maybe. Part of me wants him to know, wants him to see that I built a good life, that I'm a good mother, that I didn't need him controlling everything to be successful. You want his approval. I want him to understand that I'm not broken, that I was never broken. I was just trying to survive in a world that kept telling me I wasn't good enough. Wade thought about that. You think he'll ever understand? Probably not. Men like him don't change. They just get older and lonelier. Rosalie looked down at Clara. But I don't need him to understand anymore. I just needed myself to understand. A carriage appeared on the road. Unusual. They didn't get many visitors this late in the day. Wade tensed, old instincts kicking in. Rosalie noticed and held Clara a little tighter. The carriage pulled up to the house. An older man climbed out slowly, like his joints hurt. Victor Mercer looked smaller than Wade remembered. Older, more tired. He stood in the yard looking at his daughter holding her baby, and for a long moment nobody spoke. Father, Rosalie said finally. Rosalie. Victor's voice was rough. I got your letter about the baby. That was 2 months ago. I know, I wasn't sure if I should come. Wasn't sure if you'd want me to. I'm not sure I do. Victor nodded like he'd expected that. He looked at Clara. She's beautiful. What's her name? Clara. Clara. He tried the name out. That was your grandmother's name. I know. Another long silence. I had a stroke, Victor said abruptly, 4 months ago. The doctors say I might have another one any time. They say I should get my affairs in order, make peace with people. Rosalie's expression didn't change. Is that what this is? Making peace? I don't know. Maybe. I spent the last year thinking about what you said in court, about how I treated you, how I tried to control everything. He looked away. I told myself I was protecting you, that you needed guidance because the world is cruel, especially to women who don't fit a certain mold. But the truth is, I was ashamed. Of myself, not you. Ashamed that I cared more about what other people thought than about what you needed. That's supposed to make it better? No. Nothing makes it better. I'm just telling you the truth. Victor's hands shook slightly. I spent your whole life trying to fix something that was never broken. And I'm sorry. Rosalie stood up slowly. Clara fussed, and she soothed her automatically. You're sorry. Yes. You're sorry for calling me mentally unstable? For trying to force me into marriage with a man who didn't want me? For treating me like an embarrassment my entire life? Yes. That's not enough. I know. You can't just show up after everything you did and say you're sorry and expect me to forgive you. I'm not expecting anything. I just needed you to know that you were right about all of it and that I was wrong. Victor looked at Clara again. She's lucky to have a mother who sees her clearly. Rosalie's eyes filled with tears. Wade stood up and put a hand on her shoulder. You should go, Rosalie said quietly. Victor nodded. He climbed back into his carriage without another word.
The driver turned the horses around. They watched until the carriage disappeared over the rise. "Are you all right?" Wade asked. Rosalie wiped her eyes with one hand, still holding Clara with the other. "I don't know. I spent so long being angry at him, and now he's dying and he's sorry, and I still don't know if I can forgive him." "You don't have to decide today. What if he dies before I decide? Then you'll deal with that when it happens. But you don't owe him forgiveness just because he's sick. You don't owe him anything." Rosalie leaned against Wade, and they stood there on the porch as the sun finished setting. Clara started crying, not the upset cry, just the hungry cry. Rosalie went inside to feed her while Wade stayed outside a little longer, thinking about fathers and daughters and the complicated ways families broke and sometimes tried to mend. Inside, he found Rosalie in the rocking chair with Clara. She looked up when he came in. "I think I want to write to him," she said. "Not to forgive him, just to tell him about Clara, about our life, so he knows what I built." "You sure?" "No, but I think I need to try." Wade nodded. That was Rosalie, always trying even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. Later that night, after Clara was asleep and they were lying in bed, Rosalie said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me, for fighting for me, for building this life with me." Wade pulled her closer. "Best decision I ever made. Marrying you. Even though I was supposed to just be a practical arrangement, especially because of that, proves I'm smarter than I thought." Rosalie laughed softly. Then she fell asleep against his shoulder, and Wade lay awake listening to his daughter breathe in the next room and his wife breathe beside him. He'd lost everything once, but somehow, impossibly, he'd found everything again. And this time, he wasn't letting go. Rosalie wrote the letter to her father that night, sitting at the kitchen table while Wade put Clara to bed. She wrote about the ranch, about Clara's first smile, about the women she was teaching bookkeeping. She wrote about building something from nothing and discovering she was stronger than anyone had ever told her she could be. She didn't write about forgiveness. That part was still too complicated. The letter went out with the next mail coach. Rosalie didn't know if her father would read it or if he'd even be alive to read it. But she'd written it anyway, and that felt like enough. 3 weeks later, a response came. Not from Victor Mercer, but from his lawyer. "Mrs. Barrett, I regret to inform you that Mr. Victor Mercer passed away on the evening of March 12th. He suffered a massive stroke and died within hours. He was conscious until the end. Before his death, Mr. Mercer made several changes to his will. The bulk of his estate has been divided among various charities and business partners. However, he left specific instructions regarding you. He wanted you to know that he read your letter. He asked me to tell you that he was proud of the life you built, and that he was sorry he couldn't tell you that himself. Additionally, he has left you his personal library. He said you were the only person who would understand why those books mattered. Please accept my condolences for your loss. Charles Whitmore, attorney at law." Rosalie read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and put it in her desk drawer. Wade found her standing at the window looking out at the mountains. "You okay?" "He's dead." Wade came to stand beside her. "I'm sorry." "Are you?" "He tried to destroy us. He was still your father." Rosalie was quiet for a long time. "I don't know how I feel. I'm sad, but I'm also angry that I'm sad. I spent so long hating him, and now he's gone and I can't even yell at him anymore." "You don't have to know how to feel. You can just feel it." "He left me his library. All those books he used to hide in when he didn't want to deal with me, now they're mine. That means something to you?" "I used to sneak into his library when I was a kid, read his books when he wasn't looking. They were the only place I felt smart instead of stupid." She turned to Wade. "He knew that. Even back then, he knew that's where I went." "Sounds like maybe he understood you better than you thought. Or maybe he just felt guilty at the end." Rosalie shook her head. "I'll never know now." The library arrived 2 months later. 73 boxes of books. Everything from philosophy to railroad engineering to poetry. Wade helped unload them into the new office addition they'd built onto the house. Rosalie spent weeks organizing them, reading passages, remembering afternoons hidden between shelves while her father conducted business meetings in the next room. Some of the books had notes in the margins in Victor's handwriting, comments, questions,
arguments with whatever author he was reading. In one book, a collection of essays on parenthood, she found a note that made her stop breathing. How do you love someone when you don't understand them? How do you protect them from a world that will hurt them without hurting them yourself? The handwriting was shakier than usual. Recent, maybe. Written when he knew he was dying. Rosalie closed the book and cried. Not because she forgave him, but because she finally understood that he'd been lost too. Just as lost as she'd been, in his own way. That summer, the ranch hosted its first real celebration. It was Clara's first birthday, and also marked 2 years since Rosalie had stepped off that stagecoach in Red Hollow Creek. Martha Henderson organized most of it, because apparently that's what she did now. She'd gone from mocking Rosalie to being her unofficial second-in-command in the Women's Business Association. Life was strange that way. Half the town showed up. Ranchers and their families, merchants, even Judge Morrison, who'd married Wade and Rosalie in his boarding house garden. The women brought food, the men brought instruments. Someone started a bonfire as the sun went down. Clara toddled around the yard in a new dress, charming everyone who looked at her. She had Wade's stubborn chin and Rosalie's dark eyes, and she was fearless in the way only 1-year-olds could be. She's going to be trouble, Martha predicted, watching Clara try to eat dirt. Takes after her mother, Wade said. Rosalie elbowed him. I was never trouble. You married a stranger and started a women's financial revolution. That's not trouble? That's entrepreneurship. Emma brought over a cake she'd made. It was lopsided and the frosting was melting in the heat, but Clara loved it. She smashed her hands into it and laughed while everyone cheered. Later, after most people had gone home and Clara was asleep inside, Wade and Rosalie sat by the dying fire. You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't answered my advertisement? Wade asked. Sometimes. I probably would have ended up married to Harrison Bradford, miserable in Philadelphia, pretending to be someone I wasn't. And I'd still be alone, slowly losing the ranch, not caring enough to stop it. We saved each other. Yeah, we did. Jacob Morrison came over with a glass of whiskey for each of them. Wanted to say thank you for that cattle deal 2 years ago. Saved my operation. I would have gone under without it. You would have figured something out, Rosalie said. Maybe, but you made it easier. He raised his glass. To the Barretts. Best thing that ever happened to Red Hollow Creek. Other ranchers joined in the toast. Wade looked uncomfortable with the attention, but Rosalie squeezed his hand. Let them celebrate, she whispered. We earned it. The next year brought changes. Good ones, mostly. The ranch continued to expand. They bought out 2 smaller operations whose owners were retiring and consolidated the land into one of the largest ranches in the territory. Rosalie's Women's Business Association grew to include almost every wife and widow in 3 counties. She started traveling to Denver twice a year to meet with other businesswomen, sharing strategies and building networks. Wade took on a partner, Thomas Weatherby's grandson, who'd come west looking for work and proved to be a natural rancher. It freed up Wade's time to focus on breeding programs and long-term planning instead of daily operations. Clara turned 3, then 4. She was smart and willful and asked questions about everything. Why were cows called cows? Why was the sky blue? Why couldn't she stay up past bedtime? She's exhausting, Wade said one evening after an hour of answering Clara's questions about where rain came from. She's curious, that's good. She's relentless, also good. She'll need that. Wade looked at Rosalie. Need it for what? For whatever she decides to do with her life. The world's not kind to women who ask questions. She needs to learn early that she has the right to ask them anyway. Clara wandered over and climbed into Rosalie's lap. Mama, why do I have to go to bed when I'm not tired? Because your body needs rest even when your brain doesn't want it. But why? Because that's how bodies work. But why? Rosalie laughed. I'll explain when you're older. Clara considered this. When I'm 5? Sure. When you're 5? That's forever away. It's next year. That's still forever. Wade scooped Clara up. Come on, forever girl. Let's get you to bed. I'm not tired. I know, you already told us. He carried her inside while she protested the whole way. Rosalie listened to them negotiate bedtime. Clara insisting she needed 3 more stories, Wade countering with 1 story and a song. They settled on 2 stories and half a song. Rosalie smiled. This life she'd built.
this noisy, complicated, beautiful life. It wasn't what she'd imagined growing up in Philadelphia. It was better. When the telegram came about the wedding, Rosalie almost didn't open it. Telegrams still made her nervous, too many memories of her father's lawyers sending threats and demands. But this telegram was from Philadelphia society pages. Harrison Bradford was getting married to a man named Thomas Chen, who was described in the announcement as his longtime companion and business partner. The territory had different laws than the eastern states, different attitudes. Two men could build a life together out west if they were quiet about it. Apparently Harrison had figured that out. Rosalie showed Wade the telegram. He found someone. Good for him. My father tried to force me to marry him, tried to make both of us live a lie. But you didn't. You chose differently. We both did. Harrison and me. We both refused to be what other people needed us to be. Wade pulled her close. Best refusal ever made. That night, Rosalie wrote a letter to Harrison Bradford. She congratulated him on his marriage and told him she was glad he'd found happiness. She told him about Clara and the ranch and the life she'd built in Colorado. She didn't know if he'd write back, but she sent it anyway. 3 months later, a package arrived. Inside was a children's book and a note in Harrison's neat handwriting. Rosalie, thank you for your letter. I'm glad you escaped too. Thomas and I are happy in ways I never thought possible. This book is for Clara. It's about a girl who refuses to be a princess and becomes an explorer instead. I thought your daughter might appreciate it. Here's to the lives we chose instead of the lives we were given. Harrison Rosalie read the book to Clara that night. It was about a princess who rejected her crown and went searching for dragons. Clara made her read it 3 times. I want to find dragons, Clara announced. There aren't any dragons, sweetie. But the book says, the book is pretend. Clara's face fell. Then she brightened. Can we pretend there are dragons? Absolutely. They spent the next week pretending the ranch was full of dragons. Clara made Wade be a dragon while she rescued imaginary villagers. She drew pictures of dragons and told elaborate stories about their adventures. She has your imagination, Wade told Rosalie. She has your stubbornness. Dangerous combination. The best combinations usually are. When Clara turned 5, Rosalie started teaching her to read and do basic arithmetic. Clara picked it up fast, the same way she picked up everything, with intense focus and a million questions. Why do letters make sounds? Because that's how language works. But who decided that? People, over thousands of years. Why? So we could communicate. But why? Clara, sometimes the answer is just because that's how it is. Clara frowned. That's not a real answer. Rosalie laughed. You're absolutely right. It's not. She explained the history of written language as best she could to a 5-year-old. Clara listened with serious attention, asked 6 follow-up questions, and then ran outside to tell her father about alphabets. She's going to be smarter than both of us, Wade said later. Good. The world needs smart women. The world needs more women like you. Rosalie kissed him. The world's getting them. One women's business meeting at a time. The Women's Association had grown beyond anything Rosalie had imagined. What started as bookkeeping lessons had evolved into a network of businesswomen across the territory. They shared resources, negotiated group contracts, supported each other's ventures. Some of the women had started their own businesses. Others had taken over failing family operations and turned them profitable. Martha Henderson ran a boarding house that was always full. Sarah Chen had opened a second store in Silver Creek. Emma had bought her own small ranch and was running it successfully. We're building something, Martha said at one meeting. Not just businesses, a whole different way of doing things. What way is that? Someone asked. The way where women aren't just supporting their husbands' dreams, where we have our own dreams and the skills to make them real. The room erupted in agreement. Rosalie watched them and felt something settle in her chest. Pride, maybe. Or satisfaction. She'd spent so long being told she was worthless, that her size made her unworthy, that her only value was in who she married. But here she was, surrounded by women she'd taught and empowered, building something that mattered. She'd proven everyone wrong, including herself. When Clara was 7, she asked the question Rosalie had been dreading. Mama, why don't I have grandparents? They were sitting on the porch. Wade was in town, and Clara was supposed to be doing her reading lessons, but kept getting distracted.
Rosalie set down the book she'd been reading. You did have grandparents, but they died before you were born. Both of them? All of them. My mother died when I was young. My father died a few years ago. And your father's parents died a long time ago. Clara processed this. Did you love your father?
The question hit harder than Rosalie expected. That's complicated. Why? Because people can love each other and still hurt each other. My father loved me, I think, but he didn't know how to show it in a way that didn't hurt. That's sad. Yes, it is. Did you forgive him? Rosalie thought about that. Did she forgive him? She'd been angry for so long, but the anger had faded over the years, replaced by something else. Understanding, maybe. Or just acceptance that some things couldn't be fixed. I don't know if I forgave him, she said finally, but I stopped letting him control how I felt about myself. And maybe that's better than forgiveness. Clara leaned against her. I think you're wonderful, Mama. Rosalie's throat tightened. Thank you, sweetheart. Even though you're big. Rosalie froze. What? Jenny Martin's mother said you were big, and Jenny said it was bad. But I don't think you're bad. I think you're perfect. This was the moment Rosalie had been preparing for since Clara was born. The moment when her daughter would start noticing that her mother's body was different, that people judged it, that society had rules about what women were supposed to look like. She took a breath. Clara, look at me. Clara looked up with those serious dark eyes. My body is bigger than some people's bodies, Rosalie said. That's just a fact. Like how some people are tall and some people are short. It doesn't make me bad or good. It just makes me me. But Jenny said, Jenny is repeating what her mother said, and her mother is wrong. Rosalie took Clara's hands. There are going to be people your whole life who judge others based on how they look, who think there's only one right way to be beautiful or worthy. Those people are scared and small-minded, and you should feel sorry for them. Why should I feel sorry for them? Because they're missing out on knowing wonderful people just because those people don't look the way they expect. And that's sad. Clara thought about this. Like how Papa says people used to laugh at you when you first came here. Exactly like that. But you showed them they were wrong. I showed them I was more than they thought I was. And you can do the same thing if anyone ever tries to make you feel small. I won't let them, Clara said fiercely. And if anyone says you're bad because you're big, I'll tell them they're wrong. Rosalie pulled her daughter close. You're going to be amazing. You know that? I know, Clara said with complete confidence. The years passed the way years do when you're busy living them. Clara grew tall and smart and stubborn. The ranch prospered. The Women's Business Association became a fixture in the territory, inspiring similar groups in other states. Rosalie and Wade settled into the comfortable rhythm of people who'd been married long enough to finish each other's sentences and still find new things to talk about. When Clara was 10, she asked if she could help with the ranch accounts. You sure? Rosalie asked. It's not exciting work. I like numbers, and I want to learn what you do. So Rosalie taught her daughter bookkeeping the same way she'd taught dozens of other women. But Clara picked it up faster, understood the patterns quicker, saw connections Rosalie had to explain to others. She's gifted, Wade said, watching Clara work through a complex budget calculation. She's going to be something special, Rosalie agreed. Takes after her mother. And her father. She has your work ethic. And your brain. Dangerous combination. They smiled at each other across the kitchen table, and Rosalie thought about how far they'd come. From a desperate advertisement to this, a family, a home, a life neither of them had imagined possible. When Clara was 12, she asked about college. Some girls go to college now, she said at dinner. I read about it. There are women's colleges in the East. Can I go? Wade looked at Rosalie. Rosalie looked at Clara. You want to leave the ranch? Wade asked. Not leave forever, just for school, to learn things, to see what's out there. Clara's eyes were bright with possibility. You always tell me I can do anything, but I can't do anything if I don't learn everything first. Rosalie's heart broke a little. Her daughter wanted to go east, to the same cities where Rosalie had spent years being judged and found wanting. But Clara wasn't Rosalie. Clara had grown up knowing she was smart and capable and worthy. Clara had armor Rosalie had never had. Yes, Rosalie said.
You can go when you're old enough. Wade looked surprised. You sure? She needs to see the world, make her own choices, build her own life. Rosalie met Clara's eyes. But you have to promise me something. What? Promise me you'll never let anyone make you feel small, no matter what they say about how you look or where you come from or what you're capable of. You're a Barrett. We don't shrink for anyone. Clara grinned. I promise, Mama. 4 years later, Clara left for Vassar College in New York. She packed her clothes, her books, and her mother's confidence. Wade cried when they put her on the train. Rosalie held it together until they got home, then sobbed in the bedroom for an hour. She'll be fine, Wade said, holding her. I know. That's not why I'm crying. Then why? Because she gets to have the life I never had. She gets to choose everything. And I'm so proud and so grateful and so terrified something will happen to her. Nothing's going to happen to her. She's too stubborn. She gets that from you. She gets it from both of us. Clara wrote home every week, long letters about her classes, her friends, the city. She was thriving, making top marks, already talking about law school. Law school, Wade said, reading one letter. Our daughter wants to be a lawyer. Of course she does. She's been arguing since she could talk. She's going to change the world. Probably. Barretts usually do. When Clara came home for Christmas that first year, she was different, more confident, more certain of herself. She talked about constitutional law and women's suffrage and property rights. There are so many unfair laws, she said at dinner. Laws that treat women like property. I want to change them. So change them, Rosalie said. It's not that simple. Nothing worth doing is simple. But you're smart and stubborn and you don't give up. That's all you need. Clara smiled. You make it sound easy. It's not easy. It's just possible. And possible is enough. The years turned into decades. Clara finished college, then law school. She became one of the first female lawyers in Colorado, fighting for women's rights and property law reform. She never married, said she was too busy changing the world to bother with men who'd just try to stop her. She's happy, Wade said, watching their daughter argue a case in Denver. She's free, Rosalie corrected. That's better than happy. The ranch became legendary across the West, not just for its success, but for what it represented. A place built by a woman everyone had underestimated. A place that proved strength had nothing to do with size or background or what other people thought you were capable of. Women traveled from across the country to visit, to learn Rosalie's methods, to see proof that they could build something too. Rosalie taught them all the same thing. You are enough, exactly as you are. Anyone who says different is trying to control you. Don't let them. Wade watched his wife become a legend and loved her more every day. Not because she was perfect, she wasn't. She was stubborn and sometimes too blunt and still had days where she looked in the mirror and heard her father's voice telling her she wasn't good enough. But she kept going anyway, kept building, kept teaching, kept proving that worth had nothing to do with what the world expected and everything to do with what you chose to become. When Wade turned 60, Rosalie threw him a party. Half the territory showed up. There were speeches about his generosity, his fairness, his kindness. I didn't do anything special, Wade protested later. You married me when everyone said you were crazy. You defended me when everyone said I was worthless. You built a life with me when you could have taken your father-in-law's money and run. Rosalie kissed him. That's pretty special. I just loved you. That's all. That's everything. They sat on the porch that night, the same porch where they'd sat 25 years ago when Rosalie first arrived. The ranch sprawled around them in the darkness, solid and real and theirs. You ever regret it? Wade asked. Answering that advertisement? Never. Not once. Even with all the fighting and the court battles and your father. Especially because of all that. It proved I could survive anything, that I was stronger than anyone thought. She leaned against him. You gave me that gift, the chance to find out who I really was. You gave me the same thing. I was dying here before you came, just going through motions. You reminded me what it felt like to be alive. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, horses moving in the barn, wind through the trees, the distant sound of the creek that gave the town its name. We did good, Rosalie said finally. Yeah, we did. When Rosalie was 65, a young woman showed up at the ranch.
She'd traveled from Ohio, she said. She'd heard about Mrs. Barrett, who built an empire from nothing. She wanted to know how.
Rosalie looked at this girl, barely 20, scared but trying not to show it, and saw herself at that age. Desperate for escape, convinced she was worthless because other people said so. "Come in," Rosalie said. "I'll tell you." They sat in the office surrounded by her father's books and the ledgers documenting 30 years of success. Rosalie told her story. The advertisement, the marriage, the court battle, the slow building of something that mattered.
"But how did you know you could do it?" the girl asked. "I didn't. I just refused to accept that I couldn't." "What if I fail?" "Then you fail, and then you get up and try something else. Failure doesn't define you. Giving up does." The girl stayed for 3 days. Rosalie taught her bookkeeping, negotiation, how to spot dishonest business partners. Wade taught her about horses and cattle and ranch management. When she left, she had a job offer at one of the ranches Rosalie's association worked with, and she had something more valuable, the knowledge that she could build a life on her own terms. "How many is that now?" Wade asked, watching the girl's wagon disappear down the road. "How many what?" "Women you've taught, women you've helped." Rosalie thought about it. The weekly sessions that became monthly conferences, the letters from across the country asking for advice, the women who showed up desperate and left empowered. "Hundreds," she said, "maybe more. You changed their lives. I showed them they could change their own lives. That's different." "Is it?" "Yes. Because I'm not going to be around forever. But they'll take what they learned and teach others. And those women will teach more. It spreads, like ripples in water." Wade pulled her close. "I'm proud of you, in case I haven't said that lately." "You say it all the time." "Well, I mean it every time." They grew old together. Wade's hair turned white. Rosalie's knees started to ache. But they kept working, kept building, kept living the life they'd chosen. Clara came to visit with news. She'd been appointed as a territorial judge, the first female judge in Colorado. "I can't believe it," she said, holding the appointment letter. "I can," Rosalie said. "You earned it. Because you showed me I could, you and Papa. You proved that what people think doesn't matter as much as what you do. We just lived our lives. You lived them loudly. You refused to be quiet or small or ashamed. That matters, Mama, more than you know." Rosalie looked at her daughter, smart, strong, successful, and felt something settle deep in her chest. Not pride exactly. More like peace. She'd spent her whole childhood being told she was worthless, her whole young adulthood trying to escape that voice. And then she'd built a life so big and loud and undeniable that the voice had finally gone quiet. She'd won. Not because she'd proven everyone wrong, but because she'd stopped caring whether they were right. When Wade died, it was quick, a heart attack in the barn. He was 73 and had been moving hay bales he probably shouldn't have been moving. Rosalie found him and knew immediately he was gone. She sat beside him in the hay, holding his hand, and cried until there were no more tears. Then she stood up, dusted herself off, and went to tell Clara. The funeral was huge. People came from 3 states, ranchers who'd worked with Wade, women from the business association, neighbors and friends, and people whose lives had been touched by the quiet man who'd seen worth in a woman everyone else dismissed. They buried him on the ranch, under a cottonwood tree where he used to sit and watch the sunset. Rosalie stood at his grave after everyone left and talked to him like he could still hear her. "You saved me," she said. "You took a chance on a stranger and gave me a place to become who I was supposed to be. I hope I did the same for you. I hope I made your life better." The wind rustled through the cottonwood leaves. Rosalie chose to believe it was Wade answering. She lived another 10 years after Wade died. 10 years of watching Clara argue cases and change laws. 10 years of women continuing to show up at her door asking for advice. 10 years of building and teaching and proving that the life you're given doesn't have to be the life you live. When Rosalie died at 82, she died in her sleep in the ranch house she'd made into a home. Clara found her in the morning, peaceful and still. At the funeral, women came from across the country. Some Rosalie had taught directly. Others she'd never met, but who'd been inspired by her story. They stood in the yard of the Barrett Ranch and shared what she'd meant to them. She taught me I didn't have to be small. She showed me my worth wasn't determined by my size. She proved that strength comes in all forms. She built something that mattered. Clara listened to them all and understood what her mother had truly accomplished. Not just a successful ranch or a business association, but a revolution of belief, a fundamental shift in what women thought they were capable of. They buried Rosalie next to Wade under the cottonwood tree. The headstone was simple. Rosalie Mercer Barrett, 1848 to 1930. She refused to be small. The ranch continued. Clara ran it for a few years before selling it to the women's collective her mother had founded. They turned it into a training center for businesswomen, teaching them everything Rosalie had taught. The house became a museum of sorts. Visitors could see the office where Rosalie had caught systematic theft in her husband's accounts, the kitchen where she'd taught bookkeeping to frontier wives, the library her father had left her, filled with books and marginal notes, and the complicated legacy of a parent who'd loved poorly but tried to apologize. And on the porch where Rosalie and Wade had sat countless evenings, there was a plaque with words Clara had chosen. In this house lived a woman who was told she was worthless because of her size, her gender, and her refusal to conform. She responded by building an empire, teaching hundreds of women to do the same, and proving that worth is determined by character, not appearance. May everyone who visits remember, you are enough, exactly as you are. Years later, decades later, women still came. They stood in that yard and looked at the ranch Rosalie had built from nothing. They read about the court battles she'd won. They studied the business methods she'd pioneered, and they left believing they could do it too. Because that was Rosalie's real legacy, not the ranch or the money or even the laws her daughter changed, but the fundamental truth she'd proven with her life. The world will always try to tell you who you are, what you're worth, what you're capable of. You don't have to listen. You can choose differently, build differently, live differently. You can refuse to be small. And in that refusal, you can become something the world never expected, something it needed, yourself.